Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Broccoli Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Reality Song Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Just take a swan dive off a roof. Those words rung in her head, and she blinked slowly, looking around. She was on the school roof, with her bag, jacket, tie, case, socks and shoes sitting behind her. She must have disassociated again, as she had no memory of coming up here. Her breathing was a little labored, and her eyes were tender. She must have been crying, and from the way her legs burned, she must have done some serious running. She sat down so that her legs dangled over the edge and watched the sunset. Mom would be getting worried soon, but she couldn't bring herself to move. Tonight would be the night the monthly check came in. Mom always cried a little when she saw it. She would too, if she got a check every month just because her husband was dead. Even with the check, money was tight. Inko was a single mother, trying to raise a daughter with a slew of hobbies. Every time she even mentioned dropping one, Mom insisted that she could handle it. It was a lie, they both knew it, but to Inko it was the best she could do. Mom probably wouldn't be home for several hours yet anyway. She had mentioned taking on a late shift in the NICU tonight. She should have time. She grabbed her bag and dug around until she found her violin case. She rolled her neck as she drew her violin and bow. She stood, tucked the rosewood violin under her chin, and drew the bow across the strings. The first note echoed into the still evening air, and she smiled to herself. With the ease of practice, she launched into her favorite warm-up. It was a simple piece, one of the first she had learned. The music rang out, cool and clear, and she twirled a little as she finished out the piece, enjoying the way her hair flowed in the wind. She panted a bit once she had finished, and gently popped her knuckles. Now came the best part, her favorite song. She gently situated herself, corrected her posture, and began to play, humming the lyrics in her mind. Wandering child of the earth, do you know just how much you're worth? You have walked this path since your birth, you were destined for more. She launched into the first verse with vigor, sending the music out into the twilight. As the second round of the chorus snuck up, she quickly shook out her left hand, before plucking at the strings once more. She played on, watching the setting of the sun, the way the fiery orb painted the sky dozens of shades. When she finished the song, she pulled the instrument away from her face and bowed to her imaginary audience. She nearly jumped out of her skin when she heard someone begin to heartily applaud from an adjacent rooftop. X0X0X. Shoyuta and Hizashi had started patrol early, and had been out for half an hour when something caught Shuta's eye. A few rooftops over, there was a small figure standing near the edge of the roof. As he snuck closer, signaling Mike to follow and stay quiet, he saw it was a young girl, probably not even in her first year of high school. She had stood there for a few minutes, not moving, before she seemed to snap back to herself. She looked around for a moment. It looked like she was trying to figure out where she was. His heart seized when the girl sat with her legs dangling over the edge. After what felt like hours, but was probably only a few seconds, she stood, before crouching to grab something. He saw Mike perk up when the girl stood up holding a violin. She went perfectly still, and the world seemed to hold its breath, before she began to play. Mike slapped his arm gently when the melody became recognizable as Iz's Over the Rainbow. It was beautifully played, and the girl was smiling softly as she gently pulled the bow across the strings. She twirled as she played the final note, before lifting her violin once more. The song she played was one he vaguely knew. It was an old lullaby his sister would sing to his niece to get her to sleep. Once the girl had finished the song, she bowed to no one, before Mike began clapping like an overexcited toddler. Aizawa, thanks to years of practice, managed to erase his quirk before he could shatter the poor girl's eardrums. The girl whirled around, going pink when she saw them. She almost dropped her violin when she began frantically moving her hands. When the rosewood instrument nearly fell, she stopped long enough squat down to set it back in its case. When she stood back up, she was beaming, and he recognized her hand movements. She was using JSL, trying to communicate. Slow down there, little listener. Mike chuckled, signing as he spoke. The girl turned bright red, before slowing down considerably. Hi. I'm Izumi Midoriya. It's so cool to meet you both. I'm a huge fan. Sorry I went so fast, I got really excited. Neither of you are seen that often, so it's a pretty big shock to see both Eraserhead and present Mike. Her movements were concise, clear, and easily interpreted. She obviously had been using sign to communicate for a while, possibly her whole life. Good to meet you too, little listener. Where did you learn to play like that? Mike enthused. My neighbor taught me, along with flute, piano, and harp. Flute hurts me lungs if I play too much, but I love music. It lets me put my emotions out in the world, since I've been mute since I was 3. She signed this all like it was just a fact of life for her, like, the sky is blue, or, All Might is the #1 hero. For her, it probably was, considering she looked almost 14. What are you doing out so late? He interrupted mixed tirade of compliments. I'm not actually sure. I disassociate sometimes. I'm not even sure what time it is, since my phone is dead. My last clear memory is from earlier today. Her face darkened, and she began to pick at her nails. Have you called anyone? Let them know where you are. Mike asked, clearly concerned. No. My dad's gone, and Mom is working late in the NICU tonight. It's just the 2 of us, so I usually stay out of the house on nights she works late. The girl seemed confused when the 2 shared a look. Hey, how would you like an escort from 2 pro heroes? Mike screamed, making the poor girl jump a bit. Sure. She signed before snagging all of her things. She carefully packed her violin away, ensuring there was nothing clinging to the strings or bow. She slid her feet into her socks and shoes, shrugging into her jacket as she headed for the roof access, which was propped open with a brick. What were you doing on the roof? Aizawa asked. For a few minutes, she had looked like she was going to jump. The girl whirled around, taking the steps backwards, moving like she had done it thousands of times. I practice up there sometimes. It's quiet, so I go up there when things get rough. She turned back around mid-step and jogged down the stairs. She pulled a keyring out of her pocket and unlocked the door at the bottom. She guided them through the halls of the school, listening to Mike chatter with a small smile. She waved to the few janitors she saw, and they all waved back, shooting glances at the oddly dressed men behind her. She just smiled and nodded when they asked if everything was okay, which seemed to reassure them. They left the building and followed the girl through the streets to a series of streets that were nothing but tall apartment condos. Mike and the girl kept up a rapid stream of JSL that he could barely follow. She kept walking until they reached what looked like a decent building, nearly 20 stories. She turned to them, smiling. Thank you for walking me home. This is the nicest anyone has been to me in ages. Good luck on your patrol. With that mildly disturbing comment, she swiped a key card at a pad beside the door and ducked inside. Something is wrong, Mike said as they turned around and began climbing a fire escape to resume patrol. What do you mean? He asked, adjusting his scarf. She mentioned some trouble at school and dropping a few hobbies. She said that she's mute because of an accident as a kid, and she had a vocal quirk and had gotten it a few days before. When the accident happened, she couldn't use it anymore. Apparently, it caused some trouble at school. Mike was fidgeting with his headphones, clearly uncomfortable. Kids can be cruel. Why are you harping on this? Aizawa shot his boyfriend an odd look. I want to train her. You practically fight quirkless as is, so why can't she? Little did either man know, that question would shape Izumi Midoriya into the world's greatest hero. Izumi jogged up the steps, thinking over her encounter with her 2 favorite heroes. It had scared the hell out of her when she had heard clapping. She never played for anyone but her mother and her ViewTube channel, and that was completely anonymous. She grabbed her keys and swiftly unlocked the door, kicking her shoes off. She slid her slippers on and headed for the kitchen, rolling her neck. There was a note on the fridge, and she smiled at her mother's handwriting. Izumi, I won't be home till 1 tonight. Please remember to eat dinner and wash your face. I'm excited to celebrate your birthday in a few days, and I've already got the day off. I'll be home for dinner tomorrow, and I bought all the things for Katsudon. Love, Mom. Izumi smiled and dug around in her bag for a pen and paper, before scribbling out a note and swapping it out. She headed for her room and changed into her leotard and tights, grabbing her dance duffel on the way out. She grabbed a granola bar from the cupboard, snagged her metro pass from its hook by the door, and jogged back down the stairs, triple-checking her bag. Point shoes, hairbrush, scrunchie, pepper spray in a perfume bottle. Yup, she was good. Izumi used her hip to swing open the door, and took a deep breath as she stepped into the brisk night air. She quickly walked the 2 blocks to the metro station, checking the time on her phone. It was only 8, so she had time. She swiped her card at the till and headed for the girls' only car, dropping into a seat. She snagged her earbuds from her bag, they were present mic themed, and plugged them into her phone. She pulled up her travel playlist and hit shuffle, relaxing as the first strains of Kokomo echoed through the earbuds. X0X0X. When her stop came, she swung her duffel onto her shoulder and bounded off the train, bouncing in place as she stood on the escalator. By the time she had reached the dance studio, it was almost 9. She pushed open the door, shuddering at the burst of AC. The studio was owned by a couple of French immigrants, Marinette and Luca. Luca taught more contemporary modern dance, while Marinette taught the classics. Occasionally, Marinette and Luca would teach classes together, where they had the students try fusion dances. Those were her favorite classes. She would pair with a girl named Mina, who had an acid quirk. She waved to the receptionist, a teenager named Haruka, and pushed open the door to the locker room while twisting her long hair into a dance bun. She tossed her sneakers and duffel into her bag after digging out her shoes and phone. She flopped onto a bench in the hall and carefully pulled on her shoes before tying them up her calves. She walked the hall, looking for an open room, before finding one about a third of the way down. She pushed open the door and strolled over to the speakers, pulling up her dance playlist. She quickly stretched from her ankles to her neck, ran through some quick bar exercises, and pressed play on a song she had been planning a routine to. When the first strains of the song began to play, she carefully slid into third, and took a deep breath. From third, she slid into fifth endpoint, and slowly began to turn. Within a few seconds, she was pirouetting quickly. She counted them, 1, 2, 3, 4 turns. She stopped in an arabesque, panning. She then dropped her legs so that she was in fifth, before performing a breeze and landing on both feet in endpoint second position. She dipped into a demi-plie, and quickly swung her left leg out into a develop. Her leg dropped, and she swung into a tendu before she ended in a simple camber back. She panted as the song ended, and startled when she heard someone clap from out in the hall. She whirled around to see Madame Marinette on the other side of the glass, beaming. "That was wonderful, Izumi. Oh, you have to perform that in the fall festival. Has your mother seen that routine yet?" Madame Marinette clasped her hands in her own, beaming. Izuki gently pulled her hands back and signed slowly. "Mom hasn't seen that one yet. I don't know about performing, I've never danced on stage." It was true. Izumi never auditioned for any of the productions her dance classes put on, not for any of them. Her teachers had asked, but she always said no. "Oh, she'll love it, I'm sure. But for now, you need to head home, it's almost 10, and you have a half-hour commute." Izumi whipped her head to check the time, and flailed her hands a little when she realized her teacher was right. She waved goodbye and frantically jogged down the hall, pulling her hair down and whipping it into a ponytail. She slammed into the locker room, and hopped on one foot, pulling off her point shoes. Usually, she would take the time to massage her feet and put on lotion to soothe any sores. Instead, she stuffed her reddened toes into her socks and crammed her feet into her sneakers, before cramming everything into her bag and running for the door. She waved goodbye to Haruka, and speed-walked to the metro station, panicking. She ran down the stairs to the metro, and frantically swiped her card and ran onto the girl's only car, collapsing into her seat. She ignored the stares of those around her, and just sagged back, panting. By the time she had reached her stop, she had more than caught her breath, and was just checking her texts. There was one from Madame Marinette asking her to text when she got home, and one from Mom asking her to go to bed at a reasonable time. She stretched as she stood, and plodded off the train. She slowly made her way home, hand on her pepper spray, just in case. She made her way into the apartment, and tossed a microwave meal in to cook while she changed into pajamas. By the time she re-entered the kitchen, her food was done, and she grabbed a glass of lemonade to go with it. She sat at the small dinner table and checked the news app on her phone after she texted Madame Marinette that she was home safe. There wasn't anything shocking or new. Indevware had cost another couple million in property damage fighting a vigilante, All Might had popped up to fight some sludge villain, Bakugo had gotten caught up in the same attack, some new vigilante had, wait, what? She clicked the article, and felt her heart freeze when she saw the picture at the top of the article. It was a green sludge with eyes, surrounded by heroes doing nothing. There, suspended in the middle of the sludge, was Bakugo, eyes wide, explosions booming from his palms. He looked like he was trying to hold his breath and failing. God, how had that even happened? She frantically read the article, and sighed when she saw that he was okay. She may despise the guy, but she loved her Auntie Mistuki, and losing him would destroy the woman. Only you, Bakugo, she thought. She dropped her dishes in the sink, and headed for her room. It was almost 11, and she would have to wake up early to shower before school. Izumi woke the next morning to the sound of her alarm clock blaring, as her mother made breakfast for both of them. She scrambled to put on her uniform, tying her tie as she walked into the kitchen. Good morning, Aizu. How was your dance practice last night? Inko asked, flipping an omelette in the pan. Good, she signed once her mother had plated the food and sat down. I finished perfecting a routine that I was working on. Oh, that's great, honey. Inko gushed. I can't wait to see it. I'm sure it's wonderful. Izumi smiled as she ate her breakfast carefully. Her mother was a great cook, since Izumi's grandmother had been a chef. She had taught Izumi some really neat skills, like how to work with fondant and make buttercream flowers. Anything happen at school yesterday? I disassociated again. Wound up on the roof. Oh, sweetie, I wish I could help. I know how much it bothers you. You didn't let me finish. Izumi rapidly signed. I played my violin for a bit, and you'll never guess what happened. What? Inko asked, curiosity leaking onto her face. Present mic and eraser had heard me. Izumi signed, movements sharp, quick and precise. What? Honey, that's amazing. What did they say? Inko shouted. Izumi rehashed the evening before in great detail, all the way up to when she got home. They even walked you home? How kind of them. Those two are real heroes, not like. Inko trailed off, eyes watering. I know exactly who you mean, Izumi signed. She hated Indevware with just as much passion as her mother. Anyway, you need to get going or you'll be late. Inko sniffed, before pulling a bento out of the fridge. All your favorites. Have a good day. Inko pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, before watching as the young girl bustled out the door in a whirlwind of activity. She shuffled off to her room to go back to sleep. She hated late shifts. A lot. X0X0X. Izumi had just gotten to school when she realized that she had forgotten something big was happening today. Once a year, pro heroes would visit public schools all across Japan to see if there were any 8th grade students who stuck out as having heroic potential. Izumi scoffed to herself. She used to dream of being one of the chosen few who would spend all summer training with a pro. Now she knew that it was nothing but a pipe dream. She entered the school building and grabbed her plain school slippers. She strolled into the classroom and plopped into her seat in the middle of the classroom. Slowly she tucked her bag under her seat and folded her hands on top of her desk. Finally she sat in perfect silence while the other students started filling in, chattering. They all ignored her in turn. Good morning, students and staff. A voice crackled over the loudspeaker. This is Vice Principal Hanamura. Today is the annual Pro Hero visit. We'll be calling each of the 8th grade homerooms down to the gymnasium one at a time. While they are waiting, 8th graders are to have free time. A loud cheer rang through the room as most of the class started using their quirks. Any students who are chosen by our guests will be attending an after-school meeting to discuss logistics. Good luck. The intercom crackled again and shut down. They're gonna pick me, so none of you extras get any ideas. Bakugo scoffed from his seat. His flunkies scrambled to bolster him and Izumi just sighed. She pulled out her composition book and started to jot down ideas. She had a song idea stuck in her head that she needed to write down before it ran off. As she set aside her pen, she thought, who would be chosen? What heroes would be there? Class 8C, please report to the auditorium. Izumi stood and pushed her chair in, last to leave the class. X0X0X. In the auditorium stood none other than her two favorite heroes who she met yesterday, Present Mike and Eraserhead. She almost cried when Eraserhead looked her in the eye. What the hell? She sat at the end of one of the bleachers, trying not to sweat through her jacket. One by one, her classmates went up, and one by one they were rejected. Not even Bakugo got chosen. They said it was because neither of them could train him properly, but something told Izumi they were lying. The cycle went on for nearly half an hour, before Present Mike broke it. We heard there was a student with a voice quirk. Where are they? He scanned over the crowd of students, eyes not stopping at all. Who knew Present Mike could do subtle? Sorry, there must have been a mistake. There are no students attending that have a vocal quirk. Her teacher, Kira-sensei, smiled at the teacher. Don't lie. Eraserhead sighed. It's in her file. The teacher pet her head. X0X0X. The only student I have registered with a vocal quirk is actually quirkless. The teacher whispered, like it was some dirty little secret. Still, we need to check. Can Izumi Midoriya please come up here? Shoyuta asked, checking a paper like he hadn't memorized the girl's file already. The girl stood up, arms wrapped around her torso as she slowly walked forward. What is your quirk? He asked. Vocal reality manipulation, she signed with a hint of sadness in her eyes. Can you show us? Hisashi asked, bouncing. No. My quirk requires me to sing. I am permanently mute, due to smoke inhalation. Eraser nodded. Any special skills? Hisashi queried. I can play harp, piano, and flute, I dance tap, ballet, and ballroom, and I've taken 8 years of gymnastics. She signed, a pink blushing showing on her face. Can you fight? I know how to use a bow staff. You take this paper and head into the next room over. He handed her a pass, and watched as her face lit up like the sun. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she signed before taking the paper, grabbing her bag and heading for the indicated room. This was the next step on Izumi's road to become a hero. Izumi sat in the classroom off to the side of the gym with one other kid. She surprisingly knew him. He attended ballet at the same studio, though they were in different classes. They had paired together a few times for dances and exercises. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, before the door was flung open, admitting Mike and Eraserhead, who were emitting opposite energies. Ailriite. Mike bellowed, making Izumi wince. One part of her quirk that wasn't affected by the loss of her vocal cords was her enhanced hearing. Hey, little listeners. We're gonna call your parents, have them come in, fill out some paperwork, the usual stuff. For now, he yelled, pointing at Izumi. Need to get that throat all healed so that we can hear that voice. Can I get a YH? He could not, in fact, get a, as Hitoshi and Eraserhead just glared, and Izumi was decidedly unable. Anyway, Recovery Girl believes her quirk can heal your throat. She's gonna be here soon. Izumi froze. She had expected to be trained to fight quirkless, like Eraserhead. From what she knew of Recovery Girl's quirk, it wouldn't be impossible for her to heal Izumi. Can I call my mom? She signed shakily. Do whatever you want, problem child. Eraserhead shrugs, and she grabs her phone and stand from her bag. She sets them up so that her entire torso is in the shot, before video calling her mom and plugging in her headphones. Inko picks up on the second ring, smiling a little. Hey Aizu. What's up? You need to get to my school, she signs. I got picked for the hero internship. That's great, honey. Inko gasps, but Izumi sees the confusion in her eyes. They think they can heal my throat. Really? Inko gasped, hands flying to cover her mouth. Let me tell Dr. Masuku and I'll be there as soon as I can. Inko blows a kiss to the camera before hanging up. She's on her way, Izumi signed to the pro. And your guardian? Eraserhead asked Hitoshi. Orphan. The lilac-haired boy shrugged. The woman in charge of the group home doesn't care. You two are turning into real problem children. Eraserhead sighed. I'm going to grab the paperwork Midoriya's parents will need to fill out. Mike, don't deafen the children. X0X0X. Inko arrived 10 minutes later, looking like an ad for a nurse. When Izumi was 13, she had asked her mother to start doing Zumba with her, under the pretense of spending more time together. The reality was that Inko wasn't taking care of herself, and Izumi refused to lose another parent. Go ahead. Regained her once model-like figure, and her short-sleeved scrub top clearly showed her toned arms. Izumi! She cried, flinging her arms around her child. Mother and daughter began a rapid discussion in JSL. Hitoshi had put his head down on his desk and seemed to be asleep. Yo yo yo! Mike yelled from the doorway. You must be Midoriya Inko. He shook the hand she held out, smiling. When we meet the little listener, we realized all the potential of her quirk, if only she could use it. He gestured between himself and Eraserhead. Asked a friend of ours, Recovery Girl, for some help. He gestured to the short, graying woman beside him, who smiled up at them. Hello, it's nice to meet you. I'm so sorry it took me so long to get here. I had to clock out and convince my supervisor to let me go. She offered a hand to Recovery Girl, who gladly shook it. Always nice to meet another medical professional. The youthful heroine said. Now, let me get a look at that throat, my dear. Izumi merely nodded and opened her mouth once Recovery Girl pulled her laryngoscope from her bag. What caused the damage? The woman asked Inko. Her father was the pro-hero flamethrower. I had just run out to grab some last-minute things for dinner, so it was just the two of them at home. A villain burst in, having followed Hisashi home. The villain had a fire quirk as well, and the building was set on fire in the fight. Hisashi had stowed Izumi in a closet to keep her hidden when the villain burst in. Hisashi killed the villain, but he was crushed under a support beam. It collapsed his left lung, and combined with the injuries he sustained in the fight, he died in the hospital a few days later. Izumi was stuck in the closet for close to an hour before firefighters got her out. The doctors couldn't do anything for Izumi aside from a highly risky, highly expensive surgery. Well, from what I can see, there's also heavy scarring on the inside of her throat. I can heal her, but I want to do it in sessions. My quirk heals someone using their energy, and healing too much could put you into a coma. For now, Recovery Girl pressed a maternal kiss to Izumi's forehead. That should heal some of the scarring in your throat. Come to my clinic in 3 days at noon. Tell the receptionist you have a meeting with Dr. Chio, and she'll bring you to me. We can keep doing every 3 days for about a month, and you should be healed. I would rather you not try to do anything intense at first. No singing, no talking for more than 5 minutes, and decidedly no yelling or screaming, so I'm afraid roller coasters are out of the question. Izumi just set a hand on her throat, before frantically signing to her mother. I can breathe easier, she was bouncing a little, clearly overjoyed. She froze, before letting out a jaw-cracking yawn. Take this packet and please fill out the papers inside tonight. Our first training session will be tomorrow at noon, at the address on the 3rd page. I'll see you tomorrow, problem child number 1. Eraserhead handed Inko a thick manila envelope, and walked out of the room. Let's get you home, sweetie, Inko said to her rapidly slumping daughter. Izumi waved to Hitoshi on her way out. The two women walked to the parking lot, where Izumi dropped into the passenger's seat of her mother's car, and rapidly fell asleep. The next day, Izumi was up early, and was out the door by 7, dance bag on her shoulder. She had texted Madame Marinette the night before, asking for Hitoshi's number. She had texted back and forth with him for a few hours before she crashed. They had agreed to meet at the studio at 7:45, to get some dancing in before they headed to training at the specified address. She rode the train in silence, ignoring the dozens of people around her. If she were able, she would have been frantically trying to analyze any visible quirks, muttering incessantly. There was a man with a black misty-looking substance for a head, a woman with cat ears, and a little girl with rabbit feet. All quirks with great potential, depending on certain factors. the loudspeaker crackled, and the conductor announced her stop. Izumi stood and wove her way towards the doors, deftly avoiding tripping on bags or feet. She stepped onto the platform and jogged to the escalator, excited to get to the studio. She practically ran the 2 blocks to get there, and flung the door wide open, waving to Mina, Madame Marinette and Monsieur Luca's niece who did break dancing. "Izumi, hey, how are you?" Mina asked, hugging the shorter girl. "Good. I got picked for an internship yesterday," she signed, beaming. "That's great. I gotta get to class, but we should do lunch sometime. There's a new cafe a few blocks away that you'll love." "That sounds great, I'll text you about it later." "Bye," she signed, waving to her energetic friend as she flounced away. X0X0X. She pushed open the door to Studio 4 and smiled when she saw Hitoshi already stretching at the bar. He looked over and nodded, smiling a little. It was crooked and small, but genuine. "Hey, what did you want to do first?" he asked, signing as he spoke. Thank God he knew JSL, or this would have been really bad. "Maybe start with some partnered stretches," she signed, warily, relaxing a bit when he nodded. "I'll stretch first," he said, sitting on the floor with his legs straight out. He leaned forward and wrapped his hand around his feet, wincing a little when Izumi pressed down on his spine. "I hate this part," he groaned, and Izumi giggled, shocked when he didn't react. Her laughter was a rather unsettling sound, raspy and wheezing. He just chuckled along before standing and cracking his back. She turned around and dropped to the floor, wrapping her fingers around the arches of her feet. She leaned forward until her nose touched her knees. Hitoshi placed a hand on each side of her spine and pressed a little, making her wince when her back cracked. "Good?" he asked, concern evident. She just nodded, stretching as far as she could. They went through a few more stretches before standing up. "Madame Marinette has us working on partnered pirouettes in class. Do you want to do that now?" Izumi nodded. Madame Marinette had her class doing the same. She rocked up onto her toes and nodded at him, and Hitoshi set his hands on her waist, before spinning her slightly. They practiced that for 2 hours, until Izumi was a little dizzy. "We should go if we're gonna be on time to training. Eraserhead would probably kill us if we're late." She nodded, beginning to unlace her shoes. "Do you want to take the train together?" she signed as she stood. "Sure." He shrugged, grabbing his bag. The two walked out the door of the studio, signing back and forth about random nonsense. Once they got on the train, they both pulled out their phones and put on headphones. When they reached their stop, he tapped her on the knee, and they followed his phone's GPS to the building specified in the packet. It was a simple, squat concrete building, with a row of small windows near the roof. The door was a solid thing, made of oak wood. Overall, the building was nothing special, aside from the keypad and intercom next to the door. "I'll buzz, I guess." Hitoshi shrugged, and stepped forward to press the button. The intercom fizzled for a moment, before a monotone voice spoke. "Who is it?" "Shinso Hitoshi and Midoriya Izumi. We're the interns." "Ah, the problem children. Come in." The voice answered, and the intercom let out a shrill beep, before the door clicked. Izumi grabbed the handle and hauled it open, grunting at the weight. She held the door long enough for herself and Hitoshi to duck in. Once the door slammed shut, they were left in complete darkness. There was a rustling, maybe 20 feet above her and 10 feet to the left. Izumi grabbed his sleeve and yanked down as she dove, barely dodging what sounded like a water balloon. Someone took a deep breath, and she slapped her hands over her ears right in time for Mike to yell out an enthusiastic "yeah." Someone flipped on the lights, and there was a pair of steel-toed boots a few inches from her face. Izumi rolled to the side and shoved herself up, staying in a crouch. Aizawa was standing in front of them, looking decidedly unimpressed. "Problem Child 1, your instincts are good, but not quite good enough. Problem Child 2, be glad she grabbed you or you would be bright purple." Shinso groaned and shoved himself off the floor, rubbing his ears. "Today we're doing calisthenics. You two are dressed for dance, not a workout. Here are uniforms, go get changed into them and be back here in 2 minutes. Changing rooms are over there." He gestured to the left and pulled a juice pouch from his scarf, popping the top and taking a sip. Izumi caught the uniform he tossed at her and jogged to the changing room, unzipping her hoodie. She ducked into the room and changed as quickly as she could, stepping out a few moments after Hitoshi, sue her for being slow, sports bras SEKD. You both took 2.5 minutes to change. Not bad, but you need to be faster if you want to be heroes. A hero needs to be able to change quickly if they're called in for an emergency. In the future, you'll be made to do extra laps. For now, 3 laps around the inside of the building. Go. He pulled a bright yellow sleeping bag out of seemingly nowhere and zipped himself inside. X0X0X. For hours later, Izumi felt like sheet. Her feet hurt worse than after her first point class, and her muscles were all screaming. You didn't do miserably today, but you're going to need to improve fast. We have 8 months to get you better. The UA entrance exam is heavily biased towards those with physical quirks, so only Izumi really stands a chance, but right now you're both fighting quirkless. You have tomorrow and the day after off, day after that you will be here from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening. Mondays and Wednesday will be calisthenics. A hero needs endurance. Tuesday will be meditation and strategy. A hero needs self-control and to be able to think fast. Thursday will be agility. A hero needs to be able to dodge and move in unexpected ways. Fridays will be quirk training. A hero needs to be able to use their quirks safely and know their limits. Saturdays will be fighting. A hero needs to be able to defend themselves and others. Sundays you will have off, to rest and relax. Go home, be back here tomorrow. Izumi nodded, grabbed her bag, and trudged towards the door. X0X0X. The next day was just as hard. She got to the building 5 minutes early, grabbed her uniform from yesterday from her bag, and set a timer on her phone as she changed. 2 minutes 48 seconds. Not fast enough, but it would do for today. She stepped out to see Present Mike standing by the door. He bellowed, and Izumi repressed the urge to wince at the volume. Her hearing wasn't as sensitive as it once was, due to constant exposure to Bakugo's explosions, but it was still much more sensitive than the average person. Little listener. What is up? Nothing much. Training is hard, but in a good way. I'm excited for my next appointment tomorrow with Recovery Girl. Can't wait to hear you use your quirk, listener. Neither could she, Mike, neither could she. It had been 5 months, and today was her last appointment with Recovery Girl to finish healing her throat. For the last 2 months, she had been given permission to speak a little and to hum a few notes, but after today she would be able to speak and sing normally. She was bouncing in her seat in the waiting room, too hyper to focus on anything but the possibility of having her voice back at last. The receptionist called for her to come back, and Izumi stood up so fast she got a little dizzy. She caught her balance and skipped into the back room, sitting on the exam bed. It was only a few minutes until Recovery Girl came in, smiling at her. Hello, Izumi. Are you ready for today? Yes. Izumi squealed, trying not to scream that she had been ready for months. Ever since she had been told this was a possibility, all she wanted was to sing again, to feel her quirk smoothing out the lyrics, to belt every power chord and to stretch for every high note. Recovery Girl pressed a maternal kiss to Izumi's forehead and stepped back. Follow me, dearie. We'll head down the hall to the quirk testing room and see what you can do. Izumi jumped off the table and held the door, letting the old woman go before her. The quirk testing room was maybe 25 feet square, with heavy padding on the walls and floor. Izumi walked through the observation room and opened the door to the main room. The speakers sunk into the ceiling crackled, letting Izumi hear Recovery Girl. We'll start off with a simple song that you know the effect of. Do you have one in mind? Izumi nodded and took a deep breath. I can feel it on my tongue, brick and mortar as thick as scripture. Drawing lines in the sand and laying borders as tall as towers, she drew out the note, feeling it roll. I babble on until my voice is gone. This hill I'll die on is about 90 meters of bricks. Colored indigo, inscribed with my name and lined with cedar. But the words fall flat like cymbals crashing, like molars gnashing. The room was darkening in shades, making it look like she was at the center of a sunset. There, growing in the void, was dozens of pinpricks of shimmering light. As her voice carried, the small dots grew, glistening and forming the constellations she used to stare up at with her parents. 'Cause like constellations a million years away, every good intention is interpolation, a line we drew in the array, looking for the faces, looking for the shapes in the silence. All that's left for me to climb, to, the room was silent save for her voice, as if holding its breath to better hear her. The stars orbited around her. The heavens is the chasm of the night, and a matter of time, but I hear the rumble. As the tectonic plates start to shake, and I feel my blood pounding like the beat of a drum. 'Cause like constellations a million years away, every good intention is interpolation. A line we drew in the array, clinging to the faces, clinging to the shapes in the silence. It was like she was in the middle of her own personal planetarium. When she had her quirk, she had used this song every night to fall asleep. Her dad would play guitar, and her mother would sing along. Like constellations imploding in the night, everything is turning. And the shapes that you drew may change beneath a different light. And everything you thought you knew will fall apart, but you'll be all right. She held the last note, and smiled as the lights slowly came back on. She jumped up and down, squealing. She had her quirk. She couldn't wait for training tomorrow. X0X0X. She was 20 minutes early to training the next day, jogging in place while she waited on Present Mike and Eraserhead to be ready. She saw Shinso arrive a few minutes later, chugging from a thermos. She nodded to him, her attention mainly focused on the music playing through her earbuds. She had stayed up until 2 in the morning, coming up with songs to test. A few minutes after Shinso arrived, Mike opened the door. "Hey, little listeners," he yelled as they stepped inside. "Can I get a tea?" He bellowed as they stepped out of the changing rooms. Shinso gave his usual, unenthusiastic yeah. "Why I?" She tried to yell, but she had been so focused on her quirk that she failed to control it. Her it came out as a single note, long and pure and loud. The moment she realized what she had done, she slapped a hand over her mouth, blushing. "That was awesome," Mike screeched, throwing his head back. "You can use your quirk for half an hour at a time for now, with 15-minute breaks. Are you ready?" Izumi just nodded, still beet red. X0X0X. Izumi had run through a series of vocal and breathing exercises with Mike and Shinso to help their quirks. Mike said he did them every morning and every night. Eraserhead had just groaned when asked if he did them too. Problem child number 1, you're with Mike, figuring out what songs do what. Problem child number 2, with me. We're training on capture weapons today. Izumi nodded, tightening her ponytail. She had brought her guitar and violin to test if her quirk was more powerful with an instrument. "First song is your choice, little listener." Mike cheered, leading her to a quirk testing area roughly triple the size of the one at Recovery Girl's office. Izumi nodded, thinking. There was one song she really wanted to test. She plugged her phone into the speakers set up in the observation booth, pulled up the instrumental version, and hit play. She jogged into the testing room, braced herself. She quickly pushed through to the chorus, and smiled when she felt the air pressure and humidity skyrocket. "Here I am," she yelled as the first fat raindrops splashed onto the ground. "Rock me like a hurricane. Are you ready, baby? Here I am. Rock you like a hurricane. Here I am. Rock you like a hurricane. Come on, baby. Here I am. Rock you like a hurricane." By this point, she was at the eye of a miniature hurricane, thunder clashing and lightning flashing, wind howling and rain pouring. As the song drew to a close, the storm slowed and dissipated. The only evidence it had existed at all was her windswept hair and waterlogged clothes. That was epic. Mike bellowed over the loudspeaker. "Grab your guitar and let's see what you can do." Izumi nodded, shoving her hair out of her face. Based on how dry her throat was, this was going to be a long day. X0X0X. They had learned a few things today. Her quirk was stronger when she had used the song before. She had used constellations to show Shinso what she could do, and it had lasted a few minutes longer. It was also boosted by her actively playing an instrument. The only one she knew that she could easily play while singing was guitar, but that was also the instrument she knew best. She also got a dry throat easier, and continuing after her throat was dry led to a sore throat. All good things to know, but she was dead tired. At least Mom was picking her up today so she didn't have to take the metro. Today was the day of the entrance exam. Izumi had filed paperwork for a few support items, a mic and mini speakers, made by Mina's cousin, who worked on the speakers at the studio sometimes, and some cough drops, so those were tucked in her bag, along with extra water and a pair of better sneakers. She had made her way into the room for the written exam early and found a seat dead center. She hated the idea of being stuck in a corner or right up by the stage. She technically didn't have to take the exams, as she could just get a recommendation from Mike or Eraserhead. Shinso had gone that route when he found out that the test was fighting a bunch of robots. She just knew that Bakugo would do it, and she was itching to test herself against him. The lights flicked out, and several students shrieked. Izumi scoffed a little. A spotlight slammed on, and Mike stood on the stage. Hey he bellowed. Can I get a YH? He did not, in fact, get a yeah from anyone. Tough crowd. He muttered. Okay. There are 3. He swung around with his arms open, gesturing at the giant projector screen. Types of robots. Each of them are worth a different point value, from 1 to 3. She tried not to scream when she saw Bakugo was sitting next to her. He had just leaned forward, glaring at her as if she had just insulted his mother. She stiffened, but kept her eyes on Mike. She struggled to focus until a student began yelling. You! He yelled, pointing at Bakugo. You have been clearly unfocused for the last several minutes. This is disgraceful. Insert. The informational pamphlet clearly states there are 4 varieties of robots. If this is a misprint, it is a stain on the prestige of UA Academy. Oh, that? Mike asked. The 4th robot is worth 0 points, so we don't really mention it. If you encounter it, it's a waste of time to confront it, so just run away. Mike turned to face the audience again. At the doors are proctors with checklists. Just ask which testing ground you're in and be on your way. He pointed to the back of the auditorium, where a dozen doors swung open, letting in rays of light. Izumi stood, so fast her chair fell back, and she near ran up the aisles to the nearest proctor, ectoplasm. He pointed her towards testing ground B, and she happily clambered onto her assigned bus when she saw Bakugo storming towards her. She flopped into a seat next to a girl who looked to have a 5-point contact quirk, based on the pads on the tips of her fingers. Hi. I'm Uraraka Achiko. It's nice to meet you. The girl enthused, offering a sunny smile. Hi. Izumi responded, signing along. I'm Midoriya Izumi. Are you nervous? Uraraka nodded, rubbing the back of her neck. Yeah. My quirk isn't very useful, so I've trained it pretty hard to get here. It's just a simple anti-gravity quirk, nothing special. Oh. That's a really powerful quirk, with a lot of potential. Izumi responded, still signing. Can I ask what you're doing with your hands? I was mute for a while, so I learned to communicate through sign language. I still sign whenever I speak. Izumi blushed, clasping her hands in her lap. That's really cool. Can you teach me? I guess. I can show you the basics on the way to the testing grounds. This is how you sign, hello. Izumi raised her right hand and waved a little. My name in sign means melody, due to my quirk. You usually assign sign names to friends and family. My mom is Healing Mom, since she's a nurse, and my best friend is Tired Cat, since he's always tired and loves cats. Your name would be spelled like this. She fingerspelled Uraraka's name, before pausing. Are you getting all this? Uraraka nodded. Yeah, this is all really cool. How do you introduce yourself? That's easy. I go with hi, which I already showed you, then my name is... Here she waved her right hand back and forth over her left, like a conductor. Or I fingerspell my name. She shrugged. There's a lot of ways. So, to sign, hi, my name is Uraraka, it would be what? The brunette pouted a little, confused. Izumi gently took Uraraka's hands and showed her through the motions. A small wave meant hi. Her hand flat on her chest meant me, or s. Tapping the first two fingers of her right hand onto the first two fingers of her left meant name, and a fist with the pinky straight up being folded down meant is. It took a few minutes for Uraraka to get her fingers to position right to finer spell her name, but she managed it. So, altogether it's, Uraraka then managed to sign her first real sentence. It was sloppy and a little shaky, but understandable. Exactly. I can show you more later, I think we're almost there. Do you have any questions for now? Can you sign really fast? Uraraka asked, ping her head to the side. Yeah. I actually know how to sign most of my favorite songs. I learned all of Hamilton, since it's my favorite musical right now. Izumi blushed, looking to the side. That's so awesome. Some of those songs are really fast, and my hands hurt just from signing what I did. I can't imagine signing all those words that fast. The bus hissed to a stop, and the door swung open. Looks like we're here. I'll get your number later so we can hang out. Uraraka jumped up and bounced off the bus, a serious expression coming over her round face. Izumi sighed and grabbed her bag, slowly walking off the bus as she took deep breaths, humming a little. To warm up. She was more than ready for this. Izumi stood in front of the gate, strapping her speakers to her hips and adjusting her mic headset. She glanced at Uraraka out of the corner of her eye and nodded, before focusing on the gate. Hey-ya! Mike bellowed. It was probably coming from a speaker, but she liked the idea he was secretly standing on a random roof screaming into the sky. Start! She jolted a little, before booking it into the city, followed closely by a few others. She took several sharp turns, whirling around corners as she thought over what song to use first. Every song had at least a 15-minute cooldown, longer if she'd never used it before. It was almost like her quirk was learning each song and its power. She had just settled on one when she came face to tread with a two-pointer. She took a deep breath and began humming the opening bars. Shout, shout, shout. She projected, drawing a few odd looks. Shout, shout, shout. Shout at the devil. On the last note of the first verse, a massive blast of concussive force radiated from her mouth, like the first-gen hero Black Canary. She closed her mouth and in air through her nose, before continuing to hum as she ran off, to maintain the power. She took out dozens of robots as she ran, mentally totaling points. Izumi panted, leaning against a building. She had been running and singing at the same time for the last 40 minutes, and her lungs and throat were burning from overusing her quirk. She was headed for the gate, pleased with the 87 robot points she had totaled, when she heard someone screaming for help. Izumi whirled around, focusing on the massive zero-pointer she saw towering over the skyscrapers as it rumbled forward. Her eyes darted around the area in front of the robot's treads, eyes catching when she saw Uraraka, pinned under a piece of massive rubble. Her legs were pinned, and she kept slapping at it, managing to lift it a few inches at a time before she would lose control and drop it again. Well, Mike did mention rescue points. She muttered, booking it for Uraraka. Izumi mentally flipped through her songs, before settling on one. She grabbed the arm of a boy with spiky red hair, yanking him with her. I'm gonna save my friend, but I need help. While I lift the rubble, you pull her out. Got it? The boy nodded and kept pace. As she neared the robot, she began to sing. Achiko was panicking. Her left ankle felt like it was on fire, and her stomach was revolting. Her quirk wasn't working. She had overdone it to the point she felt woozy. She had been screaming for help ever since her legs had gotten pinned, but no one had helped her. One blonde guy had even looked her in the eye as he ran past, but did nothing. The zero-pointer was a few yards away, and she couldn't move. She took a deep breath and continued trying to shove the slab of concrete off of her legs. She was not going to die like this. She heard the pounding of footsteps, and looked up to see Izumi running over, mouth moving. Achiko couldn't hear her over the grinding of the robot's treads, but she seemed to be. Was she singing? Evidently she was. Izumi was singing a song Achiko remembered her mother blasting on the radio. But where her mom's voice was raspy and a little pitchy, Midoriya's was smooth and sweet, clear like a bell and perfectly hitting every note. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, stronger. Just me, myself, and I. Her new friend belted, smiling at her as she squatted down. Izumi kept singing as she rubbed dirt from the rubble onto her hands, before grabbing the edge of the slab of concrete. With deceptive strength, Izumi slowly stood, raising the rubble enough that the boy with her could scoop Achiko into his arms before taking off for the gate. "We have to go back. Why isn't she coming with?" Achiko asked the boy carrying her. "I dunno. All she said was to get you out while she lifted the rubble and run." "So manly," the guy answered, dodging a few pieces of debris as he ran. Zoxoxes. Izumi jogged backwards, still singing as she dragged the hunk of rubble with her. She made it maybe 20 yards away before she decided to execute her plan. She began spinning in one spot, gripping the concrete tight as she spun. After enough turns to almost make her dizzy, even with spotting herself, she let go, sending the rubble flying into the robot's face. What she wasn't expecting was the shower of sparks as the robot's head blew up. She let herself stop singing and felt her quirk power down, right before she collapsed. Izumi came to in the UA infirmary, with Uraraka seated beside her. She tapped Uraraka, who was talking on the phone, on the arm. "Oh my gosh!" the brunette yelled. "I'll call you back later, Mrs. Midoriya, she just woke up." Uraraka pressed a button and stuffed the flip phone in her pocket. "Hi," Izumi signed. "Wait, what are you signing for?" Uraraka asked, and Izumi winced. One side effect of overusing her quirk was that she could be left mute for a few hours, never more than a day so far. She had panicked the first time it had happened, scared she would be stuck in the silence forever. She quickly mimed writing something with a pen, and after a few minutes Uraraka had handed over a pen and paper from her bag. Izumi scrambled to write out a short paragraph, explaining that she was fine, and jotting down a few questions, before handing the page to Uraraka. "Oh, thank goodness. I was scared you were really hurt or something." The brunette sighed, glancing at the paper. "I'm okay. Recovery girl used her quirk to heal my ankle, which I managed to sprain, and gave me a few anti-nausea meds to calm down my stomach. The exam ended a few seconds after you collapsed." "What happened, anyway? Did you overuse your quirk?" Izumi took back the notebook and wrote down an explanation. "That song gives me all might level strength, but it knocks me out cold for a bit, since my body can't really handle it. I'll be sore for a few days, but it's no big deal." "Did the guy who helped us leave already?" She handed the notebook over and Uraraka read it quickly. "That's a really cool quirk. Kirishima had to go home, but he left his number so that you could text him later. He said what you did was really manly, like a true hero." Izumi blushed bright red, waving her hands and shaking her head frantically. "Don't be modest. It really was. You blew up the zero-pointer and saved my life. Look, I can't stay, I have a train to catch, but Recovery Girl gave me your mom's number so that I could call her and let her know you would be home late. I got your number from her and already put it in my phone and texted you. I'll see you the first day of classes, I hope. Bye." Izumi waved goodbye as the energetic girl flounced out of the room. She really hoped she could see Uraraka again. It would be nice to have a female friend. Izumi had arrived to class early with Oka-chan, so early they were alone, who was now sitting on Izumi's desk, chattering about the movie they had watched last night. Inko had insisted that the young girl stayed with them for the school year at their apartment, so that her parents wouldn't have to pay for an apartment for her. Since the girls had become fast friends over the summer, Mr. and Mrs. Uraraka had agreed. "I'm so relieved that we're in the same class." Oka-chan giggled. "I was really worried I wouldn't know anyone." "I'm glad too." Izumi giggled. Inside she was so nervous. She hadn't seen a certain someone much over summer, since she had either been training or running around with Oka-chan. Just then, the door slammed open, admitting the blue-haired boy who had yelled at Bakugo. "Greetings, fellow classmates," he yelled, moving his arms in a robotic manner. "I am Ida Tenya. It is an honor to be here." Hello," Oka-chan said, waving a little. "I'm Uraraka Achiko, and this is my best friend Midoriya Izumi." Izumi waved a little, trying not to blush at being called Oka-chan's best friend. "It is a pleasure to meet you," he yelled, chopping the air. Excuse me?" A voice came from behind Ida. My deepest apologies. He yelled, leaping aside to reveal a boy with yellow hair with a lightning bolt in it. No prob dude. Name's Kaminari, sup? He strolled into the room casually, hands stuffed in his pockets. Hi. Oka-chan smiled again. Izumi had to admire her friendliness. I'm Uraraka Achiko, he's Tenya Ida, and this is my best friend Midoriya Izumi. Hello. My apologies for blocking the door. He bowed low, at a near 90-degree angle. Like I said, no problem. Kaminari waved him off, dropping his bag at a seat. The four had soon dissolved into chatter about the school year, recounting tales of the entrance exam. And then Aizachan was all, I'm gonna sing a really cool song and get super strength. And Kirishima-kun was all, we're gonna run super fast. Aizachan is so manly. And then Aizachan was all, we the rubble at the giant robot. It was awesome. Oka-chan was bouncing around the room, hyper like a toddler on a sugar high. It really was manly as all hell. A voice called from the doorway. Izumi turned to see the redhead from the entrance exam smiling at her. It was nothing, I was just trying to save Oka-chan. Izumi signed frantically, too embarrassed to speak. Izumi! A voice called from behind Kirishima, who dodged out of the way just in time. Mina came hurtling through the door. Izumi stood up just in time for Mina to slam into her, sending both girls stumbling back. I knew you got your quirk back and that you took the entrance exam, but you never told me you got in. Sorry, Mina. I've been so busy between my internship and dance we haven't really had time to talk. I'm so glad you made it in. Izumi had her hands on Mina's shoulders, keeping the pink girl from tackling her again. Me too. And what's this I hear about you knowing Ejiro? You mean Kirishima-kun? He helped Aizachan get me away from the zero-pointer in our test grounds. Oh, those things were massive. Some guy in our area collapsed a building on ours. Mina enthused. He set off an explosion and it just caved in on itself. Izumi winced when the door, which Kirishima had closed behind himself, slammed into the wall. In the doorway stood Bakugo, who wasn't even wearing his uniform right. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. She thought glumly. She had really hoped that he would be in 1B, or even Gen Edition. Of course, the universe had been far too kind to her in the last year to do something like that. He marched in, glaring straight ahead. He barely glanced at the board before flopping into the seat directly in front of her. She sat stock still, hoping that Oka-chan would continue to block his view of her. Oh. Name's Kirishima Ijiro. Nice to meet you, man. Kirishima-kun bounced over, smiling. This is my friend from middle school, Mina, and behind you is her friend Dash, well, Midoriya Izumi, and her Friday Dash. Kirishima-kun was cut off by Bakugo standing up so fast his chair clattered to the floor. He whirled around and slammed his hands down on her desk. Luckily Oka-chan had hopped off her desk when he had stood up. What the f***? How'd you get in? Play up your dumb sob story, some weak quirkless mute piece of shit without a dad. Izumi stood up, pulled back her hand, and froze when she saw motion out of the corner of her eye. There was some kind of bright yellow caterpillar squirming into the room. At least, that's what most people would think. She recognized that eye-watering color. She smirked, took a deep breath, and sat back down. What the hell, you piece of shit? Don't ignore me. He pulled back his wrist and made a claw out of his hand. She recognized the motion and flinched when he moved his hand towards her face. She tried not to recoil too much and prayed that Aizawa would help her out. The F dash. Bakugo muttered when his sweat didn't detonate. My name is Aizawa Shoda. I'm your homeroom teacher. Attacks on each other will not be tolerated. Here are your gym uniforms. Get changed in the next 3 minutes and meet me at Gym Gamma. Aizawa was standing at the front of the room, his sleeping bag pooled at his feet and his hair floating. He tossed a stack of uniforms onto the table and trudged out the door, having kicked his sleeping bag under the podium. Oh, thanketh, she thought. Had Aizawa not interfered, she likely would have been leaving UA in a body bag. Izumi was the first one changed, timing in at 1 minute and 52 seconds. She was only the second outside, beaten by Hitoshi. They stood side by side, silently waiting on their classmates. Silent but not wordless. They were trying to come up with sign names for their classmates. Aizawa was already tired bag, while Mike was cockatoo. They had decided Bakugo would be blast anger, and Achiko had been assigned happy float months ago. Kirishima was manly rock, due to what he had told her of his quirk. Ito was proper fast, due to his emphasis on propriety and manners. Kaminari was the point of contention. Hitoshi liked the idea of calling him lightning dumb, but Izumi said that was mean and way too obvious. She liked the idea of lightning flirt because of how he talked to all the girls. They decided on silly shock flirt and were deciding what to call Yamamo when the rest of the class arrived. Uraraka seamlessly slipping into the conversation. She had gotten much better at ASL over the last 4 months and had taken to signing when she spoke to practice. Aizawa was just watching them dully, sipping from one of the juice bags he was addicted to. Once everyone was outside, he slipped the juice bag into his scarf and cleared his throat. Like I said inside, I'm Aizawa Shota. I'm your homeroom teacher. First person to guess my hero name gets an on any essay they want, just not the final. Shinso, Midoriya, you're excluded for obvious reasons. We're running quirk tests. Bakugo, you're up first. Toss this, use your quirk, just stay in the circle. Aizawa tossed Bakugo a ball, who caught it one-handed. Bakugo stalked into the circle and wound up, pulled back, and threw the ball, setting off an explosion from his palm right as he released the ball. It soared over the horizon, disappearing into a grove of trees. Beat that you dumb extras. He chortled. 705 meters. Not bad, but if you delay the explosion a few seconds you'll get better force. This looks so fun. Mina cheered, punching the air. Izumi locked eyes with Shinso, who looked to be silently screaming. She imagined she looked the same. Fun. Aizawa hissed. You think this is fun? All right. Last ranked 3 kids are getting expelled. Welcome to Class 1A. The class burst into protests, and Aizawa just stared at them. Shinso and Midoriya were at the back of the class, and were helping each other stretch. You can't do that. The short boy, Minoru Mineta, had wailed. Here at UA we have a freestyle teaching policy. I can do whatever I want so long as none of you die. First is the side step. Midoriya and Hitoshi are up first, since they thought to stretch and not complain. Izumi walked forward and rolled her neck, readying herself. Go! Aizawa grunted, and Izumi started off at a reasonable pace, keeping her tempo even. She went for almost 4 minutes and 15 seconds at the same speed. She stepped aside and dropped to the ground, taking her water bottle from Hitoshi. She chugged maybe a quarter and swiped at her mouth. Not terrible. Next. Aizawa grunted. X0 X0 X. And so it went. The class was pushed to the limit, and in the end, almost 3 hours later they were on the last one. They were all doing the ball throw, save Bakugo. Everyone but her. Somehow, Achiko had gotten a score of infinity. Izumi was starting to lag, and her throat ached. Midoriya, you're up. Aizawa called. She nodded and began to chant the opening to AC/DC's TNT, a song that gave her a rather impressive ability. Smiling a little, Izumi started to sing. She had made her way to the circle and was in the process of rubbing her hands together as fast as she could when she hit the chorus. She picked up the ball and bounced it in her sweaty hand a few times to gauge the weight. Izumi crouched down, reared back, took a deep breath, and threw the ball, setting of a truly massive explosion right after she let go. While the ball went soaring, she dropped to the ground, clutching her wrist as tight as she could. She really hoped it was just strained, but damned if the force of the explosion hadn't made it hurt like F-. Hitoshi jogged forward and crouched next to her. That's the biggest one you've made so far. How bad does it hurt, 1 to 10? He asked, taking her wrist in both hands. He gently rolled it around, pressed in a few spots, and gently tested her range of motion. 6. She hissed when he pressed in the wrong spot. Not broken, but more than a sprain. Aizawa-sensei, can I take her to recovery, girl? Aizawa just nodded, pulling up his sleeping bag. Everyone else, get changed, grab a syllabus from the classroom and go the hell home. I'm taking a nap in the teacher's lounge. He began to squirm away, much like the caterpillar he resembled. Izumi sat on a bed in the hospital wing, her wrist pressed against her chest. Recovery girl had to check on Denki, who had been so startled by her explosion that he had short-circuited somehow. She suspected that the electricity he emitted fried his neural pathways, which probably had a faster than usual recovery time when it came to electric damage. It wouldn't shock her, pun not intended, if his brain went into a minor shutdown every time he overloaded himself. Recovery girl came toddling over and pressed a light kiss to her wrist. All fixed, Izumi dear. I'll see you next Thursday for your checkup on your throat, okay? The older woman patted Izumi on the knee and smiled at her, before walking away. Izumi waved with her now healed hand and smiled. Her throat was a little sore, so she was trying not to overdo it. Hitoshi was waiting outside for her, and Uraraka had already started heading home, since she had a video call with her parents in half an hour. Izumi grabbed her messenger bag and made her way out to where Hitoshi was leaned against the wall. Hey! He grunted. Ready to go? Yeah, she signed, looking up at the sky. It looked like the weatherman had been wrong, there wasn't a cloud in sight. Mom wants you over for dinner tonight. Says she wants to spoil all three of us. I've even got someone for you to meet. Oh, and here I was, thinking you didn't have any friends. He gently bumped his shoulder against hers as they walked. She giggled a bit. He's not a friend, dummy, he's my older cousin. There was a distinctive bounce in her walk. After all, it wasn't like she got to see her big brother Dobby very often. X0X0X. Izumi rocked back and forth as she waited on the sidewalk. Hitoshi had ducked into a florist to grab a bouquet to give to her mom as a thank you for dinner. She, sadly, had pollen allergies, so she had to wait outside. She was just admiring the clouds as they rolled by, when something slammed into the wall beside her head. She reared back, grimacing when her back slammed into the bricks. Deku! A far too familiar voice snarled. What the F-. Bakugo was looming above her, one hand framing her into the wall. She was frozen in place, eyes wide. Izumi felt like a deer in the headlights, and Bakugo was the 18-wheeler about to crush her into paste. She felt her breathing begin to pick up, and her hands were starting to shake. This was bad. Bakugo was generally a deech, but whenever she would have a panic attack in front of him, he would get even worse. The world was dimming at the edges, and the general noises of a city street were getting quieter and quieter as she began to recede into her mind. She barely registered the door beside her opening, or someone pulling Bakugo away. It wasn't until someone set a hand on her shoulder that she snapped out of it. X0X0X. Hitoshi had just finished paying for a bundle of baby's breath and yellow roses when he looked out the window. What he saw made his blood boil. Izumi, looking scared out of her wits, was being cornered against the wall by Bakugo. He snatched the bouquet and ran out, grateful for once to be so plain-looking. Bakugo didn't even look at him until he forcefully pulled the blonde away from his friend. What the hell, man? He snapped. Off, you shitty dash. Leave. Go home, don't make any stops, just go the hell home, then pinch yourself to snap out of this. He may not be legally allowed to use his quirk in public yet, but there wasn't anyone around to report him, so who cared? The blitzed-out Bakugo seemed to struggle for a moment, before beginning to walk down the street. Hitoshi didn't bother watching, he just set the flowers aside and gently set a hand on Izumi's shoulder. Aizu, eyes on me, okay? Her eyes snapped up to him, and he took one of her hands and pressed it to his chest. Follow my breathing, okay? She nodded a bit, and slowly began to copy his breathing. After a few minutes, she had calmed down, and was staring at the sidewalk, clearly embarrassed. Hitoshi said nothing, and merely grabbed the bouquet. Come on, your mom is probably waiting. Then, in a daring move, he grabbed her hand and started walking. X0X0X. They got to the apartment 10 minutes later, Hitoshi still holding Izumi's hand. She let go to step forward and swiped her key card, and he held the door for her. They took the elevator to the top floor, and Izumi opened the door to the third of the 4 large apartments on the floor. Thanks to the monthly checks they got from the Hero Commission and Inko's rather large salary as head nurse at a local hospital, they were able to afford a larger place with an extra room or two and plenty of space for Izumi to dance. They toed off their shoes and Izumi led Hitoshi down the hall to the living room. "Mom. Oka-chan. We're here." She had just stepped into the living room when a tall man with burn scars all over scooped her up and swung her around. "Tiny dancer," he yelled, spinning wildly. "Burning man." Izumi cheered, giggling like a maniac. He stopped after a few dozen spins and dropped her onto her feet. Now that Hitoshi got a better look at him, he looked past the heavy scarring. He had the same eyes and nose as Izumi, and when he smiled down at her he had the same dimples. "Hito-kun, this is my big brother, Dabi. He lives in Tokyo, working at the Ingenium agency as a costume designer, so he doesn't visit often." Izumi was holding the man's hand, beaming at Hitoshi like the sun. "Dabi and this is my best friend, Shinso Hitoshi. He's in my class at UA, same as Oka-chan, who you met on your last visit." "Good to meet you, kid," Dabi said, ruffling Izumi's hair. "Come on, Auntie wanted you to show me your latest routing, the one with all the spins at the start." "Okay, let me go grab my point shoes and warm up and I'll show you. I'm pretty proud of it." She ran off towards the direction of her practice room, and Dabi turned back to face Hitoshi, who suddenly realized just how intimidating the man looked. "So, you're little Aiza's friend?" Hitoshi nodded, mouth dry. "Look, she's told me all about you, from your quirk to your shoe size. My sister adores you. If you hurt her in any way, I have ways to make a body disappear. Got it?" "Yes, sir." Hitoshi managed to get out despite how tight his throat was all of a sudden. "Great." Dabi was smiling again, like he hadn't just implied that he could murder Hitoshi and get away with it. "Come on, kid, Auntie is making soba." Dabi clapped a hand on Hitoshi's shoulder, and the young man was not surprised at how tight his grip was. After Dabi gave Hitoshi the shovel talk, the two boys headed for the living room. Achiko was relaxing on the couch, chatting with her parents on the phone, and waved at them when they came in. "Ah, Hitoshi, there you are. Relax for a bit, dinner should be ready in a minute." Inko called from the kitchen. "Thanks, Auntie," he said, trying not to think about what Izumi's older brother could possibly do to him. "Come on, squirts, Aiza's gonna show us her routine," Dabi called, leading them to the practice room. The majority of the flooring was the type of hardwood needed for ballet, while a thin strip by the door was plain carpet with a few chairs set up. Izumi was standing in the middle of the room with her feet in fourth, smiling. She nodded to Achiko, who hit play on the music. X0X0X. The music began, and Izumi took a deep breath. She went into a camberback and slowly performed a simple assemble out of a chas. The music picked up, and she performed a series of pirouettes and avant. From there, Izumi launched into the portion of the routine she had choreographed months ago. She stopped in an arabesque, panning. Then she dropped her legs so that she was in fifth, before performing a breeze and landing on both feet in endpoint second position. She dipped into a demi-plie and quickly swung her left leg out into a develop. Her leg dropped, and she swung into a tendu before she ended in a simple camber back, in the same position and spot she had started in. The music ended, and her small audience burst into applause. X0X0X. "That was great, Izumi. You have to perform that in the fall festival." Inko cheered. "Auntie is right, Aiza-chan. That was epic." Achiko bounced over, grasping Izumi's hands. "Good job, kiddo. Looked great." Dabi ruffled her hair, grinning. "Pretty cool." Hitoshi grinned at her, trying not to blush. She was so talented and cool. "It was really nothing, just something simple I put together for fun." Izumi was red in the face, and took back one of her hands to rub the back of her neck. "Besides, with training with Aizawa-sensei and school, I doubt I'll have time to rehearse enough to get ready for the festival." "We'll convince you eventually, Aiza-chan." Achiko sing-songed. "For now, dinner should be done. All four of you, go wash up." Inko shooed them all off to the bathroom to clean up while she made her way to the kitchen. They all reconverged in the dining room, the kids helping Inko carry food from the kitchen. Inko had made a large, American-style meal. Inko's father, James, was a man from America. He had moved to Japan for work and fallen in love with Makoto, Inko's mother, who owned a small bakery. As such, Inko had tried to introduce her daughter to all parts of her heritage through food, the way her parents had done to her. Tonight's meal was a pork roast, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, buttermilk biscuits, and corn. Inko had made mochi for dessert, in almost a half-dozen flavors. "Auntie, your food is so good," Achiko gushed. She was eating the most out of all of them after Dabi, whose Quirk burned calories to make his fire. He had gone through extensive Quirk therapy after his mother had transferred custody to Inko, to make it so that he knew how to safely use his Quirk without hurting himself. Now, he used it to smelt specialty metals for the costumes he made. Over dinner they discussed a variety of subjects, such as Dabi's latest project, a visor for hawks, and what Inko had been dealing with at work, another expectant mother who wanted to be treated like a queen, before conversation turned to the first day of UA. "Our teacher is Aizawa-sensei, so we get to continue with the routine we've already established, which is nice." Izumi grabbed another biscuit and slathered it in butter as she spoke. "Does that mean you'll be staying late to continue training, or will you be meeting him at that old warehouse?" Dabi asked, stuffing a large bite of casserole in his mouth. "No clue." He decided to send everyone home early after a Quirk apprehension test. Hitoshi shrugged and took a bite of pork roast. The meat was tender and moist, and every bite was bursting with flavor. "Auntie really was a fantastic cook. Try to find out tomorrow, okay? I want to start spending more time with my baby sister." Dabi reached across the table to ruffle Izumi's hair, who just huffed at him. With her mouth full of food, her cheeks were puffed out, and with the way she was pouting she looked like an angry bunny or a squirrel. "What about work?" Izumi asked after she had swallowed, tilting her head to the side. Now, Hitoshi thought, she looked like a curious puppy. "I asked my boss about getting a transfer." "Oh, where to?" Inko asked, wiping her mouth. "Nowhere special really. Just the costume department of UA." Dabi shrugged and kept eating, as if he hadn't just dropped a small bomb. If it wasn't for his small sheet-eating grin, Hitoshi would have thought he was genuinely oblivious. "Seriously?" Izumi squealed. "Yup." Dabi set down his knife and fork, paying full attention to the topic at hand. "I want to be closer to you, and maybe have a chance to interact with Shoto. I haven't exactly been able to see him." "Wait, Shoto? Like the half-and-half guy in Outclass?" Achiko asked, clearly lost. "Ah, that's right." Izumi snapped her fingers. "We never told you guys the full story of how Dabi became Mom's ward. See, it all started about 10 years ago. I was only 4 and Dad was still alive. My dad's sister-in-law, my Auntie Ray, called Mom sobbing. She said that she had accidentally hurt one of my cousins, Shoto, and that she needed to get her eldest, Tuya, out of the house, before my uncle hurt him. My uncle is a pro hero who's obsessed with being number one, or training the number one hero. That included his kids. Dabi and I's Quirk has the potential to seriously hurt him, that's why he has so many burns. Auntie Ray filed emergency custody paperwork to get Dabi and I out of that house, and made him Mom and Dad's ward. Tried to get custody of my other cousins, Natsuo, Fuyumi, and Shoto, but Auntie had been sent away to a mental hospital, and my uncle refused to let any of them go. He said they were his kids and that we needed to butt out." "Wait, I'm confused," Achiko said. "Who's Tuya, and I thought Dabi was your brother or something?" "Technically, we're cousins, but I view Aizu as a baby sister. As for Tuya, Tuya Todoroki is my birth name. I legally changed it when I hit 18 4 years ago. I wanted nothing to do with that man. I just want to see my other siblings again." Dabi shrugged, glaring at his plate. Izumi stood and walked around the table, wrapping her older brother in a tight hug. "You will Nichan. We'll get them out soon." Izumi was in her dance room before school, happily practicing her arabesques. She had one leg up, her foot almost touching her head, when the door was slammed open. She yelped and fell, landing on her hip in a way that guaranteed a bruise later. She hissed and rolled to look at whoever had just burst in. It was Dabi, looking thoroughly unimpressed. You're gonna be late, Aizu. Achiko is waiting by the door. He offered her a hand up, which she gratefully took. Dabi helped her up with very little effort on his part, before shooing her off to the bathroom to get ready. She whipped her hair into a simple French twist while shoving her feet into her shoes, wincing when the bobby pins dug into her scalp too much. She had just grabbed her bag when she heard Dabi clear his throat behind her. Forgetting something? He asked, smirking. In his hand was her iPod and earbuds. She whacked herself on the forehead and sighed. I don't know what I would do without you, Dabi and I. She reached for the phone, but he only held it up higher. She giggled, before pecking him on the cheek and gladly taking her phone. Dabi ruffled her hair, smiling at her in an odd way. She snagged a breakfast bar and tugged on Okachan's hand, giggling as they ran. X0X0X. Have a good day, Aizu. Dabi murmured as she ran out the door, barely remembering to grab a breakfast bar from a basket by the door. Some days, when she looked up at him with her eyes all shiny and that stupid big smile, his traitorous mind superimposed the image of a small boy with a large bandage covering his left side, staring up at him with hero worship. He stood, lingering in memories of days long since past, before he shook himself from the remembrance. He turned around and made his way to his room to get ready. Today he would be seeing his costumes in action, and that was always his favorite part of the job. X0X0X. Izumi ran down the street with Okachan, laughing wildly as they dodged around the other pedestrians. They swiped their cards as they reached the metro station, rushing to the train. They collapsed onto the seats in the girls' only car. Wait, who is that in the corner? Achiko signed, subtly pointing towards the corner furthest from them. There was a girl with long green hair and her tongue poking out slightly. The most attention-grabbing thing was that she was wearing a UA uniform. She was playing on her phone, distracted. Her? Izumi asked. She's in our class, Azui. She has a frog quirk. Let's go talk to her. Okachan decided, standing, grabbing the handrail, and making her way across the car. Izumi sighed and grabbed both their bags. As much as she adored her friend, Achiko was severely forgetful at times. Izumi made her way across the car to where Achiko was waiting. They nodded to each other and sat on each side of the girl. Hi, I'm Achiko Uraraka, and this is my best friend, Midoriya Izumi. We're in your class. Okachan held out a hand to Azui. Kero, I thought I knew you from somewhere. I'm Azui Tsu, nice to meet you. She shook Okachan's hand, before turning to Izumi. So, Midoriya, I'm curious about your quirk. It looks identical to that one boy's, Bakugo. Are you related or something? Me and Bakugo? No, luckily for me. We did go to the same middle school though. My quirk is kinda weird, it's called Bard's Hymn. I sing a song and that song grants a unique power. If I overdo it, I can get a really sore throat and can lose my voice for a while. I also have larger lungs and more sensitive hearing. The song I used yesterday was TNT by AC/DC. It lets me convert my sweat to nitroglycerin and detonate it in my palms. However, the blasts can damage my wrists due to the knockback. That's why I had to go to Recovery Girl. I fractured my wrist with the blast. Izumi blushed, rubbing the back of her neck. So, what's your quirk? Oh, I was wondering that too. Achiko said, jumping back into the conversation. The trio chattered happily all the way to you, unaware of the blood-red eyes locked onto them from the next car over. Izumi jogged up the steps to the terminal near the entrance to UA, only to reel back when she saw a group of people swarming the main gates. Luckily, she had studied a map of the school and knew there was a secondary entrance if she could find the. There was a small switch that, when she flipped it, revealed a key card scanner. She grabbed her student ID from her wallet and quickly inserted it, smiling when it opened. The wall hissed, making a watching Achiko squeak, before part of the wall slid away like a pocket door. The opening in the wall revealed a small section of the grounds, and Izumi grabbed her friend's hands and dragged them through before the door closed. Kara, what was that? Tsuyu croaked. A hidden entrance, for if something happens to the main entrance. It's also how the morning custodial staff gets in before the main gate is opened. It was built in as part of the school's defenses when they revamped part of the wall a few years ago. Izumi explained as she resecured her ID card. Wonder what all those reporters want, Karo. Tsuyu commented, staring at the crowd. Well, All Might is a teacher here, maybe they want to interview him? Achiko shrugged, adjusting her bag. Whatever it is, it's making us dangerously close to late. Izumi yelped. We need to get to class. The other girls checked their watches and squeaked, and all three booked it to class. X0X0X. Izumi slid into her seat right before the bell rang, while Achiko and Tsuyu barely made it through the door in time. Midoriya, Uraraka, Azui. The three of you are late and on only our second day. This is highly improper behavior of heroes in the making. Ida reprimanded, chopping the air like a demented robot. Relax, Ida. Kaminari, the one with the electric quirk, scoffed. The press outside made everyone late even. Everyone sit down and shut up. Aizawa's voice came from the front of the room, and Kaminari yelped. Aizawa unzipped his sleeping bag and slurped at his juice pouch, staring at them with dead eyes. I'm not your first teacher today, I'm only here to take roll. Clearly you're all here, so I'm leaving now. Don't kill each other, it's too much paperwork. He dragged his sleeping bag behind him as he left the room, which immediately burst into quiet whispers. Who do you think our teacher will be? Achiko asked, staring at the door. I have some ideas. Izumi muttered. Aizawa had spent the last month of her training complaining to Mike about an upstart who didn't even have a teaching degree, and would probably get someone killed, the stupid sunflower. Add to that the time All Might and his intern had dropped by to get Aizawa's opinion on something and he hadn't stopped glaring at him the whole time, it wasn't a hard puzzle to solve. Her hunch turned out to be correct when the number one hero burst through the door, with some ridiculous declaration. Before Izumi had first gotten her quirk as a child, she had wanted to be a hero just like All Might. Then her quirk came, and she wanted to be like present Mike, and she realized how much damage All Might's fights caused. He was good at using his quirk against villains, yes, but he often forgot how much destruction he caused in the meantime. While all her classmates cheered and cried out in awe, Izumi merely sat, waiting. Please change into the hero costumes in the racks off to the side and meet me at Battlefield Gamma. All Might decreed, before sweeping out of the room dramatically. Izumi waited until those around her had claimed their suits before grabbing her case and making her way to the changing room. She ducked in and quickly changed, smiling at the way her suit fit. Her costume was simple, a black form-fitting jumpsuit with no sleeves, a belt full of useful items, and a hooded jacket made of Kevlar. The support items was where most of her costume budget went. She had a speaker-like mix, and a mouthguard that also protected her throat. The mouthguard looked somewhat like a muzzle, and could either make it so that only she could hear her song, or boost the volume enough to project it several blocks in any direction. As she tied her heavy boots, she glanced around at the others' costumes. There were a lot of issues. For example, Okachan's. The helmet was bulky, and the visor too big. One good hit and she would be left with no facial protection. While Yayazora's costume was somewhat practical, she also had no head protection, and Jiro's jacket would more than likely get in the way with how loose it was. At least they all had time to work on their costumes. Izumi, as a protege, was allowed to get her costume early so that she could adjust it as necessary ahead of time. Often proteges had uncontrollable quirks, and pros would choose them to help them refine their quirks. Izumi tucked her bag into a locker and nodded to Achiko on her way out. Shinso had beat her to get changed this time, and was waiting off to the side. He glanced at her costume and nodded appraisingly. His was not dissimilar to hers, really. He wore a long-sleeved Kevlar blend shirt, a pair of thick overalls, and a pair of heavy boots. He had a capture scarf like Aizawa, and a mouthguard like hers. The only difference was in their color schemes. Hers was soft browns and creams, like a nightingale, while his was dark grays and blacks. Once everyone was outside, All Might held up 2 boxes and began explaining what was possibly the most insane first day of class combat exercise she had ever heard of. He hadn't bothered to ask their quirks, their experience level, anything. She saw now why Aizawa didn't like having him as a teacher. Someone was bound to get seriously hurt doing this. Izumi heaved a sigh and waited for her name to be called. Midoriya and Shinso will be on the villain team. They will be up against Todoroki and Bakugo as heroes. All Might declared, holding up 2 ping-pong ball. She was dead. Maybe Hitoshi could be a pallbearer at her funeral. Izumi nodded to Hitoshi and pulled up her muzzle, slipping her earpiece in. He copied her, and the two stalked off to the side, stretching as they strategized. The hero team may now enter. All Might called. Izumi was in a severe back bend, her hands around her ankles, and she simply placed her hands on the ground and kicked over, pushing herself into a back walkover. She giggled when several of her classmates, who had been watching her and Hitoshi's shows of flexibility in awe, squeaked. She waved to Okachan and pulled out her mask, a simple bandana, and tied it around her head as she walked. Hitoshi slipped his goggles on. "Ready?" He signed, and she nodded, taking a deep breath. She hadn't had time to warm up, so this might end poorly. Look at me, will I ever pass for a perfect bride or a perfect daughter? She didn't take her time to enjoy the song or the feeling of her quirk flowing through her, and instead rushed to the chorus. Slowly, the ground nearby began to turn to mud, before taking shape. The end result was a perfect clone of her, which stood beside her and waited for orders. "Distract Bakugo, keep him busy." The clone nodded and ran into the building. The duo waited a few minutes, until the clone went running off down the street with Bakugo close behind, screaming expletives and threats. She giggled and nodded to Hitoshi, who was clearly smirking. The duo had barely entered the building when a massive explosion came from outside, shaking the building. Bakugo probably broke the DM clone, we need to hurry. She signed, adjusting the volume control on her muzzle to full blast. Hitoshi clapped his hands over his ears, and she began to sing once more. "Be careful making wishes in the dark dark." His voice echoed down the empty halls, flooding the silent area in sound. "Can't be sure when they'll hit there, mark. And besides, in the meantime, I'm just dreaming of tearing you apart. I'm in the details with the devil. So now the world can never get me on my level. I just gotta get you out the cage, I'm a young lover's rage, gonna need a spark to ignite." Hitoshi clapped a hand on her shoulder as she prepared for the line that would activate her quirk. "My songs know what you did in the dark." Hitoshi tensed, and she knew her quirk had acted. This particular song caused anyone who heard it to go completely blind while giving her night vision. To everyone else, the world was pitch black, while she could see with absolutely no light. She grabbed Hitoshi's hand and began making her way slowly up the stairs, guiding her friend behind her. They eventually got to the floor where they assumed the bomb was being held, and she tapped Hitoshi on the wrist twice. Creeping down the corridor, she saw an open room, the bomb in the middle, and the floor covered in ice. "What the sheet? This wasn't the plan." Hitoshi yelled. "Izumi! Fucking quit it!" She giggled, and he bit his lip, clearly trying not to laugh. "Who's there?" Todoroki called, and Hitoshi smirked. "Unice the floor and step away from the bomb. Don't try to interfere." Todoroki went slack, and quickly shot a few jets of controlled fire at the ice he had created. Hitoshi dramatically bowed to her, offering his arm. She burst out laughing and took it, before casually strolling up to the bomb and poking it. "Hero team wins." All Might called, and Izumi just smiled, high-fiving Hitoshi as best she could while he was blind. "Whoa. She finished out the song, and she saw when Todoroki regained his vision shortly after. He blinked wildly before catching sight of her and Hitoshi. There was another few large explosions from outside, along with a long string of curses. She bit her lip and giggled a little, before bending over and bursting out laughing. Hitoshi chuckled, before losing control and joining her. "Oh my god, we actually won." He cackled. "I would have paid to see his face." She crowed. "It must have been priceless." He snorted, struggling to catch his breath. After several minutes, they started making their way back down the stairs, a shocked Todoroki following them, staring at the ground. The two friends continued to joke and laugh as they made their way back to the building. Izumi failed to notice the heavy blush on Hitoshi's face, but none of their classmates did. "So, who was the MVP in this match?" All Might asked. "Midoriya, easily." Kaminari cheered. That first song was awesome, but what did the second one do? Oh, that one was My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark by Fall Out Boy. It blinds anyone who hears it and gives me night vision. The first song, Reflection, creates a highly unstable clone of me. It lasts only 10 minutes and dissolves into goop when under extreme force. That's why Bakugo's explosion destroyed it. So, like, what is Shinso's quirk? Hitoshi tensed beside her at Kirishima's question. 'Cause it looks super manly. My quirk is called brainwashing. I just need an individual to respond verbally to a question and then I can control their actions. It's not as cool as Aizu's quirk. He shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck. Izumi froze a little, before deciding to figure out why her heart stuttered when he called her that. Nonsense. Yours is way cooler. She defended, blushing. Mine is just a quirk mutation. It's really nothing special. I can't even hum when I have a song stuck in my head because it could be dangerous. Either way, both of you have super strong quirks. Oka-chan cheered. You guys did great. Indeed. A most impressive fight. Ida cheered. Izumi gave his costume an assessing look. Good for defense, but it would limit his motion. That could pose a problem in the future. An excellent bout. Can anyone point out what mistakes the villain team made? Bakugo was too easily distracted and chased Midoriya's clone longer than necessary. He didn't even stop to look for Shinso. Yayazoru commented. Exactly. Bakugo, who had just gotten back from having chased the clone halfway across the city, stalked past All Might. He walked past everyone, ignoring their questions, and slammed the door to the changing room behind him. What's his problem? Yeah, he messed up, but we're still in training. There's no need to get so upset over losing. Jairu commented. We have a history, I suppose you could call it. Basically, I was quirkless for a long time, and he thought that made me an easy target for bullying and quirk discrimination. The only reason I never got a DMN restraining order on his butt is because our moms are friends. Izumi shrugged. She rubbed her throat, and Hitoshi reached into his belt and pulled out a bottle of throat spray and a cough drop. Oh, thanks, Toshi. She beamed and quickly spritzed the spray down her throat before popping the cough drop in her mouth. It was strawberry, her favorite. I'd forget to eat if you and Nichan didn't remind me. She giggled. Probably yeah. He chuckled. Come on, Aizawa said to head back to the classroom once we were done here. K. She cheered. Good luck, Oka-chan. Waving to her friend, she flounced into the changing room. X0X0X. Hitoshi entered the boys' changing room and slammed his head against the nearest locker, groaning. Stupid, stupid, stupid. He chanted, continuously banging his head against the cool metal. Why had he called her Oizu in front of the whole DMN class? And had she really called him Toshi? He was such a mess. You done? A gruff voice asked. He looked up, head almost against the locker again, to see Bakugo glaring at him. What do you want? He grabbed his bag and began to change. Look, I may not like Deku, but she is my godsister. I'm sure you've heard this from Dabi already, but if you hurt her, you're dead. Got it? I'm sorry, are you the guy who told her to kill herself, trying to give me the goddamn shovel talk? He asked, head halfway through his shirt. Are you calling me a bad godbrother? Bakugo roared. Stay away from Aizu. You ever make fun of her again and I'll make you humiliate yourself in front of the whole Demon school. Hitoshi dropped his hero suit in the laundry bin and strolled out of the changing room to see Aizu waiting for him. What took you so long? You were in there almost 3 full minutes. Sensei would have you running laps for an hour because of that. She teased, poking him in the side. He scoffed and threw an arm around her shoulder, tousling her hair with his other hand. Toshi! She squealed, pulling away. Race ya to the classroom. She shouted, already halfway down the hall. Cheater! He yelled and began to chase after her. Izumi beat him to the classroom. She had always been faster, whether it be running laps or free running, her time always beat his. He caught up to see her standing outside the room, calmly leaning against the wall. Getting slow, Toshi. She teased and he scoffed. More like you're getting faster. Come on, while we have time let's ask Aizawa about our training. We're gonna have to adjust schedules again soon. Autumn Festival is almost here and Madame Marinette wants us to perform. Why do I feel our lives are about to get very complicated? She asked, groaning. He held open the door and she absent-mindedly thanked him as she entered before him. Aizawa was lying on the ground behind the teacher's podium in his sleeping bag, curled into a tight ball. Izumi showed him a mischievous look before taking a deep breath. Sensei, there's a cat. She yelled, and Hitoshi winced. Since she had larger lungs, she could be loud, even without her speaker. Aizawa bolted upright, looking around wildly. After he scanned the whole room, he slumped a little. Izumi was cackling, bent in half, and Hitoshi was trying not to laugh. Aizawa was clearly disappointed. Problem children. He sighed, standing up and shoving the yellow monster under the podium with his feet. Sensei, what's going to happen to our training? Hitoshi asked. We'll be staying after every day in Gym Gamma for at least an hour and a half. I'll get you a proper schedule later. Grab a syllabus and get to Gym Gamma. 5 minutes, including changing time, starting now. Go! He yelled. Izumi darted to the front of the room and snagged a paper, before zooming past him and into the hall. Hitoshi scoffed and grabbed a paper before picking up the bag she had dropped and following after her at a milder pace. Aizawa sighed again. These two would be the death of him. X0X0X. Izumi quickly changed into her gym uniform and grabbed her speaker from the case. During battle training, and hadn't that been a hot mess, she had thought of a few improvements to her speaker, but she needed to test the current limits first. She slipped the mouthpiece on and began humming to warm up a bit, nodding to Aizawa when he came in. Hitoshi joined her at the side of the gym shortly after, also wearing his mask. Izumi tapped him on the shoulder to grab his attention. Ready to see what these things can do, smirking from behind his mask, she could tell from the look in his eyes that he was excited, but Toshi rarely actually smiled. Usually he just smirked. That was okay though. She understood, and that was all that really mattered. And nodding at her. Running through the basic stretches, she fired off a one-handed text to Achiko telling her to head home alone, and asked her to tell Mom she would be home late. Achiko, who used far too many emojis, quickly replied that she would. Problem children, one at a time. I like having eardrums. Problem child 1, you're up first. Izumi nodded and took a deep breath, before beginning to sing. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality. Open your eyes, look up to the skies and see. She rolled her shoulders and tugged off her gloves, getting ready. I'm just a poor boy, I need no sympathy. Because I'm easy come, easy go, little high, little low. Anyway the wind blows, doesn't really matter to me. Drawing out the last note, she mentally counted the bars to the chorus. She had time. This song was draining, due to the length and the power involved. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Hitoshi and Aizawa heading for the corner, where insulated pads lined the floor and the walls. Probably a good idea. Mama. Ugh. Didn't mean to make you cry. If I'm not back again this time tomorrow, carry on, as if nothing really matters, she continued to sing, feeling the slight tingling in her fingers that meant her quirk was rapidly activating. Curling her fingers around nothing, she braced herself for the rush of power. Taking a deep breath, this song took a lot of them, she reached the part that would summon her ability. Thunderbolt and lightning, very, very frightening me. She flicked her wrists, and 2 massive whips made of crackling electricity flared to life in her hands. Spinning around, she flicked and snapped the whips, scorching the flooring and filling the air with heavy static. So you think you can stone me and spit in my eye? So you think you can love me and leave me to die? Oh, baby! The whips began to die down a bit, losing power and length as the song wound down. Anyway the wind blows. She froze panting as the room seemed to sway around her. Her vision was odd, as if she was staring at the world through a fishbowl. Suddenly, the floor was rapidly approaching her face, and the world went black as Hitoshi screamed her name. Grass-green eyes fluttered open, feeling like they were weighted down by massive stones. She let out a groan at the harshness of the lights above her, but her arms were too weak for her to block out the light. Aizu? You're awake. She managed to look to her left, where Hitoshi was sitting beside her on the bed, holding her hand. Huh? It happened. Her voice was raspy and her mouth was dry, like she had overused her quirk. I can explain that, dearie. This time, the voice came from her right. The curtain that was around her bed had been pulled back to reveal Recovery Girl. Crud, she was in the infirmary. Between the battle trial earlier today and that song you used in training, you severely overused your quirk and fainted from exhaustion. Aizawa tells me that the song in question takes a lot out of you. I'll need you not to use your quirk for the next 12 hours, drink lots of fluids, and rest. Once you feel up to standing, you can head home. I'll be in the next room if you need me. Recovery Girl turned on her heel, surprisingly spry for her age, and tottered away. How long was I out? She asked, letting her head flop back against the pillows. About an hour and a half, problem child. Aizawa parted the curtain and stepped in. I just got off the phone with your mother. She says your older brother is coming to pick you up. I'm going home. Your mother has my number if you somehow manage to get hurt more. Just like he appeared, Aizawa turned and walked away, sipping on his juice pouch. Ni-chan is gonna kill me. She groaned. Just suffocate me with a pillow, Toshi. Nope. Then I would have to face your mom. Both laughed a bit. Inko was terrifying when she wanted to be. Are you up to moving? Dabi is probably waiting on us. Slowly sitting up, Izumi nodded. Alright. I'll step out and tell Recovery Girl you're headed out. You get your shoes on. Izumi nodded, just now noticing that someone had taken off her shoes and set them at the foot of the bed. She carefully pulled on her shoes, going slow so that her sore body didn't hurt worse. Quirk exhaustion was a beach, and often left her feeling like she had danced a full show afterwards. Once she had her shoes on, she cautiously stood, keeping her hands up and to the sides in case she fell. Once the room stopped swimming, she opened the curtains to see Toshi waiting. Let's go. She pasted on a smile, trying to assuage her friend's obvious worries. She grabbed his hand and began walking down the halls. Almost 5 minutes later they got outside. Standing by the gates, there was a crowd of people, surrounding something. Izumi groaned when she realized there was a person in the middle of the crowd. There was no way it wasn't her Ni-san. He had likely brought his car and not Mom's discreet SUV. That was bound to grab attention. Glancing at Toshi, she took off at a slightly wobbly run towards the crowd. Elbowing her way through the throng of people, she burst through to see her brother playing on his phone while all the students, who seriously needed to mind their own business, stared at him and muttered. How did he get those scars? One girl murmured. He looks like a villain. Another exclaimed. Who cares what he looks like? Check out the car. A boy declared. Ni-san. She panted. It seemed she was still tired from overusing her quirk, she realized as she swayed a little. Hey kiddo. Mom sent me to get you, since she had a shift tonight. Come on, Mom said Hitoshi could come over for dinner. I'm grilling tonight since she's working late. Dabi dug his keys out of his pockets, clicking the fob to unlock the car he was leaning against. See, Dabi's car was a thing of beauty. Sleek and hot rod red. The car was a 1960 Cadillac Series 62 convertible. It had been in sheet shape when Dabi bought it, but he had spent his entire senior year of high school rebuilding it from the axles up. Now, the car was in pristine condition. Couldn't you have brought the SUV? She grumbled, sliding into the back seat. Kiddo. You make it sound like Layla isn't good enough for ya. Dabi chuckled, swinging from the roof, through the window, and into the driver's seat. That was another thing. Tiny Izumi had insisted that the car needed a name. Dabi had decided that was just the best idea he had ever heard, and promptly dubbed the convertible Layla. It's the attention she brings that I can't stand. She sighed, sagging against the black leather seats, groaning at the feeling of the sun on her face. You're just too shy. Dabi scoffed. We can work on that. Izumi did not want to know what he was planning. The next day dawned early, Izumi rolling out of bed at 7 instead of her usual 8. UA had a heavy focus on maintaining students' physical and mental health, including their sleep schedule, so classes didn't start until 9 am, and students were all dismissed at 4. She silently made her way to the kitchen, queuing up a lo-fi playlist and grabbing ingredients. As she kneaded dough, she hummed along, careful not to activate her quirk. She didn't know what would happen with music that was meant to relax people but had no lyrics, but she wasn't eager to find out. Rolling the dough out flat, she brushed on butter and sprinkled on the sugar mixture. Now came the hardest part. She carefully began to roll the dough up on itself, careful not to tear it. Once she had one long roll, she wet a knife and began to cut the log into 4-inch-tall rolls. Setting the half-dozen rolls into a pan, she covered them with a damp towel and turned off the lights. Dancing down the hall, she ducked into the bathroom and hopped into the shower. 45 minutes later, she was ready for school. Her hair was dried and pulled back, and the dough was done rising. Popping the rolls into the oven, she ran to her room to get ready. She had 5 minutes, so she swiped a dash of highlighter across her cheekbones and grabbed a tin of lip gloss to put on after breakfast. Aizawa-sensei had told them they were only doing non-combative classes today. Once that was done, she went back to the kitchen and popped breakfast into the oven before making a large pot of coffee. Between Dabi and Mom, and Oka-chan, they would need to make another. Izumi was the only one in the house who didn't drink coffee because Madame Marinette banned all her dancers from heavy caffeine, since studies had shown that it weakened bones and increased joint pains. Izumi took her dancing far too seriously to disobey such a strict rule, even during finals week. Sitting on the edge of the counter, she pulled out her phone and scrolled a couple news apps. There came a thump from down the hall, probably Dabi and I rolling out of bed again. He was a restless sleeper and had issues with sleepwalking when he was younger. A muffled series of curses followed, and then the sound of footsteps. She smiled when he came staggering into the kitchen, looking like a zombie from the horror films Oka-chan loved to watch. He trudged past without looking at her, instead just grabbing his mug from the drying rack and filling it with at least 6 tablespoons sugar before filling it to the brim with coffee. Izumi crinkled her nose at the foul smell. Next into the kitchen was Oka-chan, who was quite the opposite of Dabi. She was fully dressed, her hair partially pinned back, and she cheerily greeted Izumi on her way to make the biggest, milkiest coffee possible with absolutely no sugar. Dabi, already on his second cup, sniffed deep, raising an eyebrow. "Do I smell Grammy Midoriya cinnamon rolls?" he asked. "Up. They'll be done in about 5 minutes, and then I need to let them cool. I made the frosting last night," she chirped, pulling the piping bag from the fridge. "You are a tiny goddess," her brother declared, setting a hand on her head. "Oh, those are the ones you made last month that tasted so good you and Shinso were almost late to training." Oka-chan cheered. Izumi blushed. All she did was follow a recipe. "What's this about cinnamon rolls?" A groggy voice came from the doorway. Izumi smiled as Inko trudged into the kitchen, slumping onto the bar stools by the island. "Aizu-chan is making breakfast." Oka-chan cheered, while Izumi just blushed more. Shoving on a pair of oven mitts, she pulled the pan from the oven, smiling at the smell of skis and warm dough. She set the pan atop the stove and shucked the oven mitts. Dabi and I reached for one, only for Izumi to smack his hand. "They need to cool. I'm going to check the news, please don't get burned." After setting a timer on her phone, Izumi sighed, rolling her neck and shoulders as she walked to the living room. Flopping onto the sofa, she grabbed the remote and flicked on the TV, flipping channels. Seemed as if the press was still outside you. They'd need to use the side entrance again. In other news, Endeavor, curse his name, had a new sidekick, going by the name Hawks. He had potential, between his flirty attitude and flashy, powerful quirk. Flipping the channel again, she perked up when she saw Mike Sensei on a talk show. They were discussing the upcoming UA Sports Festival. Right as she went to turn up the volume, the timer on her phone went off, indicating that the rolls were cool enough to frost. Pouting, she turned off the TV and made her way back to the kitchen. Gently, she pulled each of the rolls out of the pan, setting them on a tray. With her tongue sticking out the corner of her mouth a little, she carefully pipped a copious amount of frosting onto the cinnamon rolls. Dabi and Oka-chan had settled at the island with Inko, sipping coffee and chatting about their first day at UA. Both were not so subtly watching her, waiting for the food to be ready. As soon as she stepped away from the counter, both dove across the island, grabbing a roll each. "These are so good, Aizu-chan." Oka-chan cheered around a mouthful of food. Dabi and I just groaned, stuffing half the roll in his mouth at once. Izumi giggled, flushing. "If you say so. Now, we have 15 minutes before we need to leave, so eat quick." Achiko glanced at the wall clock and squeaked, shoving a good chunk of her roll in her mouth and coughing a little bit. Izumi just sighed and rolled her eyes a bit. "I'm gonna grab my bag, be ready?" Achiko nodded, stuck in a staring contest with Dabi over the biggest cinnamon roll. Dabi blinked when Oka-chan blew a puff of air at his face, and she cheered, grabbing the roll. Izumi giggled, a feeling of contentness filling her chest. Carefully, she grabbed a roll and tucked it into a disposable Tupperware container, setting it atop her books in her bag. "Oka-chan," she called, towing on her favorite red flats. "Coming." The brunette called back, jogging down the hall. "Bye Mom, bye Ni-chan," Izumi yelled, shutting the door behind herself. X0X0X. The train ride was dull as usual, the two girls chattering about lessons. They arrived at the UA station to see Tsuyu waiting there for them, sitting on a bench and playing on her phone. She looked up when Achiko stopped in front of her, and all three girls made their way up above ground. Izumi led the girls through the same door as yesterday, before slamming hard into someone on the other side. "Sorry about that." The figure helped her up from the floor, revealing themselves to be a truly massive boy with blonde hair styled in a way that reminded her of a character from the old comics her dad collected. "I'm Mirio Togata, a third year. You must be one of the first years, I haven't seen you around before." Yup," she responded. Embarrassing. She had just rammed into her senior, all because she was trying to deduce what would be happening in class today. "Nice to meet you, I'm Uraraka Achiko. This is Tsuyu Azui, and the adorable cinnamon roll who bumped into you is my best friend, Izumi Midoriya." Izumi squeaked a bit, frantically picking up her bag and checking on the Tupperware she had tucked inside. It was fine, and the lid had stayed on tight. The icing may be a little smeared, but that would be okay. She gently placed the container back on top of her books, sighing in relief. "Come on, Aizawa-sensei will kill us if we're late, Karo," Sue said, grabbing both her friend's wrists. Izumi waved goodbye to the upperclassmen as the frog girl, who was shockingly strong, dragged her friends behind her. "What a weird girl," Mirio muttered to himself, before turning and making his way towards All Might's office. Maybe he would be able to use more than 5% of One for All today without breaking something important. X0X0X. The girls made their way to class on time, only to see Aizawa writing something on the chalkboard. It looked like a training schedule, based on the one they used for summer training. The only thing they wouldn't be doing was meditation, probably because Aizawa didn't want to have to teach 20 kids how to meditate. Today was a day free from hero training, which meant she had to sit through 4 academic classes. Not terrible, but certainly not the most exciting thing in the world. She made her way to her seat just in time for the bell to ring and Aizawa-sensei to turn around. "You have all of homeroom to pick a class president and vice president. Don't bother me." He pulled the yellow monstrosity out from under the podium and zippered it closed, before curling up in the corner. "I want to be class prez." Mina cheered. "No way. It's gonna be me," Kirishima shouted, punching the air. This, of course, sent the whole class into a huge debate on who would be the class president. Izumi heaved a sigh and leaned back in her seat, setting the small Tupperware from her bag on Hitoshi's desk next to where he had laid his head on his arms. She gently tugged on a random strand of lilac hair, making her friend groan pathetically. "I brought food," she sing-songed. "What do you offer, oh puny mortal?" he asked, peeking out at her. "Only the finest cinnamon rolls, oh tired one." Izumi giggled. This pleases me." Hitoshi sat up, groaning at the way his back popped. He popped open the Tupperware and took a deep whiff of the smell of skis and frosting. "You are a tiny goddess, seriously. I forgot to eat this morning. I am not that short." Izumi huffed. So what if she was only 4'11", She could still kick butt. Hitoshi just smirked at her, taking a bite of the cinnamon roll. He hummed a bit, before swallowing the bite he had in his mouth. So, Aizu, who are you voting for? He gestured vaguely to the front, where everyone's names were written on the board. Dunno. Probably Ida or Yayazoru, they seem responsible. Lord knows we don't have the time for it, between training and dance. Speaking of, hey Mina-chan. She called, pulling the pink girl from a serious debate with Kirishima in the front of the classroom. What's up, Izumi? Mina asked, bouncing over to her desk. When is the next integrated class? I kinda wanna come, but it depends on when it is. Oh, it's tomorrow at noon, Studio 4. Wanna partner up? Sure. It's been a while since we did a fusion. Fusion was what Madame Marinette and Monsieur Luca called mixing dance styles. It was a reference to some old cartoon, from what Izumi remembered Madame Marinette saying. Sweet. I can't wait to dance with you again. Hey, Shinso, you gonna join us? If I'm awake in time, yeah. He shrugged, still eating. I'll call you and wake you up on time, don't worry. Izumi said. Toshi just grunted as he had a mouthful of the last bite of his breakfast. Great. You two dance well together. Mina commented. Everyone be quiet. Tenya yelled. We will do this rationally. Place your heads down on your desks and cover your eyes. We will be called up one at a time and vote in desk order, and no one will know who votes for who. With a bit of reluctance, everyone complied, even Bakugo, though she heard him mutter more than a few curses. When she was called up to the front, she paused, hemming and hawing for a moment, before making her mark on the board under Yamamo's name. When she sat back down, she tapped Toshi on the shoulder, waiting for him to sit up. When a moment passed and he didn't move, Izumi giggled a little. He was asleep. Pissed. Toshi! She hissed, shaking him by the shoulder. He snorted a little, sitting up. Was it? He grumbled, rubbing his eyes. Your turn to vote, then we have English. He nodded, ruffling her hair as he passed. Izumi sighed, putting her head back down. Something told her Toshi had the right idea. It was going to be a long day. She was awoken a minute or two later, all to hear the results. Looks like you won second, Aizu, Toshi muttered. What? But I'm so busy as is, and I'm not good with people. She squeaked, hands flapping. Yeah, but you're super brave and smart, and you have such a cool quirk. Mina cheered, getting agreements from most of the class. I guess, if you guys insist. Izumi felt flustered. She'd never been trusted like this before. X0X0X. Present mixed English class was not easy. Sure, he had taught her and Toshi the basics of the language, but today was a pop quiz. Crud, what was the correct conjugation of was in this sentence? Gods, this was hard. Thankfully, it was multiple choice. Right as she bubbled C on the last question, the bell rang for lunch. Grabbing her bag, Izumi made her way to the door and waited, as Toshi was still packing his things. As soon as he reached her, the two took off down the hall at a leisurely pace, chattering about what would be served for lunch. Izumi was hoping for katsudon, while Toshi wanted soba. The cafeteria doors were propped open, meaning that they could both see the large crowds of students seated at almost 50 circular tables. Oh geez, Izumi muttered, grip tightening on the strap of her bag. Ugh, people, Toshi grumbled. I'll grab a table, you grab the food? He offered, and Izumi had to take a second, before nodding. See you in 5. He offered her a closed fist, and Izumi tapped her knuckles against his, shaking off her trepidation. Something wasn't right, she just couldn't figure out what was bugging her. Hopping in line, Izumi was pleased to see that the food was served buffet style, and that some of the options included soba and katsudon. Grabbing a bowl of each, Izumi balanced them on a tray and carefully typed both hers and Toshi's student ID numbers into the keypad at the end of the line. Looking around, Izumi smiled when she saw Toshi had grabbed a wall table. Making her way over, she scanned the cafeteria. There were so many interesting quirks. Several students had mutation types. One girl even had cat ears and a tail. Ah yes. Delicious soba. Toshi sighed, pulling his bowl towards himself. Looks like the cafeteria has a different menu each day. I'll try to figure out the pattern, Izumi commented, separating her chopsticks and preparing to dig in. Just as she picked up a bite, a tray was set on the table next to her. Hey, I can't believe you guys ditched me. Oka-chan pouted. Sorry, Uraraka. We were discussing stuff for dance. Toshi supplied, the lie rolling off his tongue easily. I still can't believe how hard dance is. You guys make it look so easy. Achiko sighed, making Izumi giggle. Over summer, Achiko had tried to attend a dance class with Izumi, and had fallen flat nearly a dozen times, and had lightly sprained her ankle. That's from training since I was 4, Oka-chan, and Toshi has to do a lot of extra training for lifts and stuff. Izumi pointed out, picking up a piece of pork. Right as she got it near her mouth, several chairs around the table were pulled away from the table. Hey, it's been a while. Kirishima-kun cheered, setting his tray next to Toshi's. Hey, Aijiro, what's up? Mina asked, sitting between Kirishima and Achiko. Pardon me, is this seat available? A voice asked, and Izumi turned to Sita standing at the seat beside Toshi. Go ahead, Oka-chan said, spearing a bite of salad on her fork. Izumi mentally took note of the fact that her friend had grabbed the cheapest thing on the menu. Achiko was a serious penny pincher and was too proud to apply for the UA financial aid program. She would have to ask Mom to make a big dinner tonight, since Achiko would likely be hungry by the time they got home. Right as she was preparing to take another bite, the chair between her and Ito was pulled out. Excuse me, may I sit here? The tall girl who had won the class president asked. Yayazora was her name, from what Izumi remembered. Have a seat. Mina replied, and the dark-haired girl sat down slowly. Her tray was loaded with calorie-heavy foods, a bowl of katsudon, a cupcake, a bottle of soda, and 2 plates of American-style fries. Thank you very much, Yayazora said, smiling at them, and her smile was perfect, teeth blindingly white and ruler straight. Of course. So, I know we did this in class already, but we should go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Mina Ishido, but you can all call me Mina. My quirk is called acid, and I love to breakdance. Mina said. Your turn. She poked Kirishima in the side, and he swallowed his bite of pulled pork before speaking. The name is Aijiro Kirishima, and my quirk is called hardening. I can harden my skin into a rock-like substance. I like to work out, I guess? I don't have many hobbies. You're up, Shinso. Kirishima said, smiling at the table as a whole. I'm Hitoshi Shinso, I'm 15, and my quirk doesn't matter. I like volunteering at animal shelters on the weekend. Next. Toshi grunted, still eating. I am Tenya Ida, second son of the Ida family. My hobbies include reading, studying, and training my quirk, which is called engine. I have a pair of engines in my lower legs, leading to a set of exhaust pipes on my calves. It is an honor to meet you all. Ida said, bowing his head so low that he almost headbutted the table. Hello. I'm Momo Yayazoru, but you can all call me Yamamo, since my last name is a handful. My quirk is creation. I can use the fat cells in my body to create practically anything non-organic, so long as I know the molecular structure. My hobbies include learning new things and spending time with my family. My turn, I suppose. Izumi said, quickly taking a sip of her water. My name is Izumi Midoriya, and my quirk is called Bard's Hymn. Every song I sing grants me a different temporary power. My hobbies include ballet and music, though I can't sing along due to my quirk. It's nice to meet. Before Izumi could finish her sentence, the emergency lights came on, and an alarm began to blare. Students, please remain calm. We are at a level 5 security breach. Students, please remain calm. Oh. All the students in the cafeteria promptly ignored the loudspeaker and began swarming the doors. What does level 5 mean? Oka-chan shouted, and Izumi tried to get the words out past the lump in her throat. It means there's an intruder. She stammered lowly. When her anxiety got too high, words got hard again. Ugh, probably the press again. Toshi scoffed. Friggin' vultures. Wasn't that just a level 3? Mina asked, uneasy. 5 me means that there's someone past the gates. Izumi managed to get out. Gritting her teeth, she breathed in a deep breath for 3 seconds, held for 4, and exhaled for another 3. After doing that 5 times, therapy was seriously helpful. She managed to focus back on the situation. Okay, Yamamoto, I need a bullhorn or a megaphone. On it. The girl nodded and unbuttoned her blazer and began to focus her quirk. Oka-chan, make me float, and Ida-san, I need you to give me a boost, Izumi said, thinking fast. Right. Achiko said, gently tapping her on the cheek with her left hand. As soon as the megaphone was ready, Yamamoto passed it to Izumi, who had 1 foot in Ida's cradled hands and 1 hand on his shoulder. Ready? She nodded, and Ida launched her upwards towards the ceiling. Hey! Izumi shouted through the megaphone at full blast. Between her expanded lung capacity and the full volume of the megaphone, several students had to cover their ears. Calm down. It's probably just the press again. Everyone needs to calm down before someone gets hurt. You're all about to trample somebody. This is not appropriate behavior for students of UA. There was some grumbling from the crowd, but everyone slowly began to head back to their tables. Looking down, Izumi was glad to see Toshi and Ida-san ready to catch her. Nodding to Oka-chan, she squeaked a little at the feeling of free falling through the air almost 10 feet. She landed in the 2 boys' interconnected arms, and she was quick to hop up and straighten her uniform. That was great thinking, Midoriya, Ida said, chopping at the air. Yeah. Super manly. Kirishima cheered, pumping his fist in the air. I just didn't want anyone getting hurt in that chaos, Izumi said, looking around. I'm glad that the teachers all ran out to handle the situation. I'd rather not get us all in trouble for Yamamoto and Oka-chan using their quirks without permission. I hadn't even thought of that. Oka-chan grumbled. I don't think any of us did. Mina sighed. Some days, rules can SK. Ida looked rather constipated for a moment, before speaking up. Indeed, rules can be constrictive, but they exist to keep everyone safe. Hey Ida, with the way you talk you sound like some stuck-up rich kid. Achiko teased. My family is rather well off, as we are a family of heroes. My elder brother, Tensei, is the turbo hero, Ingenium, and my mother was the speedster heroine, Slipstream. I previously attended Somei Junior High. Ida was blushing a little, and Izumi giggled. Apparently, the stern boy was easy to fluster. Let's head back to the classroom. I'm sure the heroes are all done with the issue. Izumi said, snagging her bag from the floor. Slowly, the group gathered up their things before leaving the cafeteria as a cluster. X0x0x. By the time they got back to the classroom, everyone seemed to have calmed down a bit, and Izumi had made up her mind. As soon as everyone was seated, their group was the last to arrive. She stepped to the front of the room. I'd like to say something. While I'm really happy that you all chose me as class rep, I feel like, with all the things I do as hobbies, on top of schoolwork and training, it would be best for me to step down. I'd like to recommend Ida take my place, since he's more organized than I am. Thank you all for putting your faith in me, but I'm just not suited for the position. Izumi bowed, fighting to keep the blush off her cheeks. I am most flattered and humbly accept, Ida said, standing up just to bow to her. Understandable, Aizawa grunted. Now, everyone sit down and shut up, we're having a pop quiz on quirk laws. Izumi sighed as she sat down. Looked like everything was back to normal. Good thing she studied the other night. The next day, Izumi sat in the back seat as the car stopped in front of Hitoshi's family townhouse to pick him up. Hitoshi waved goodbye to his mom and mama as he stepped outside, calling out to them. Hey! He called, jogging down the steps. Hey! Dabi said, waving. Hop in, kid. Hitoshi slid into the back, slinging his bag onto the floor by his feet. Sup? Toshi grunted, tapping Izumi on the shoulder. She tugged out an earbud and smiled at him, glancing up from her phone. Hi. I heard Aizawa-sensei talking to Mike-sensei yesterday. We have a field trip on Monday. Izumi was bouncing in her seat, excited. Sounds cool. Achiko chirped from the front seat. I wonder where we'll be going. Probably some hero agency, Toshi said, adjusting his jacket to serve as a pillow. Wake me up when we get there? He asked, leaning back. Always, Izumi said, offering him a sleep mask from her pocket. He took it with a smile and pulled it over his eyes, resting his head against the window. Izumi smiled as her best friend drifted off to sleep. Izumi put her earbud back in, returning her attention to the true crime broadcast she was listening to. It was a personal favorite, one that drew attention to the murders of people with villainous quirks, weak quirks, or mutant quirks, and even a few quirkless people here and there. It was fascinating. The current topic was a series of disappearances of women and girls with mutant quirks. They were scattered across Japan, and there was only a single clue, a handprint in red paint, at the site of every kidnapping. Right as she got to the good part, Dabi reached around his seat and tugged on the cord of her earbuds. Were your eyes? Get Hitoshi up, yeah? She nodded, stuffing the phone in her pocket and winding up her headphones. With her spare hand, Izumi reached over and pulled the eye mask away from his face about an inch, before letting go. It snapped against his skin gently, and his gentle snoring stopped. He stretched with a groan, scratching at the back of his neck. Seriously, Aizu? Hitoshi asked, pulling off the mask and shooting her a look. She shrugged. Today was a bad day. After the chaos yesterday, she was not feeling so hot. Words didn't want to come out, and every time she was asked a question, she could feel her throat close a bit. Dropping the mask in her bag, Izumi opened the door, waving goodbye to Dabi. He was taking Achiko out of town to a mall that was having a sale. They would be back in an hour and a half to take them. Plenty of time to dance and unwind. Adjusting her bun, Izumi made her way to the door, too eager to dance to wait on Toshi. Pushing open the studio doors, Izumi waved to the receptionist and jogged to the changing room, excitement bubbling in her chest. She hadn't been to the studio since school started, and even though the apartment had a dance room, it wasn't the same. Izumi! Mina cried, flinging herself at her friend and wrapping her arm around her shoulder. Wasn't yesterday crazy? Ugh, I am so glad that today is Fusion Day. Izumi nodded, smiling as she sat down to pull on her slippers. Hard day? Mina asked, her tone one of understanding. Izumi nodded again, adjusting her leotard and tugging her leggings down. Anything special you want to dance to? Shh. Izumi hummed around the mouthful of bobby pins she had. Oh, you always pick the best songs. Mina cheered, punching the air. So, is it American or from an anime this time? The pink girl teased, and Izumi held up one finger. Sweet. I'm gonna go warm up. See ya out there. Izumi nodded, yanking a brush through her hair and twisting it into a tight bun. As soon as she was done, she chucked her bag in her locker, slammed the door shut, and made her way to Studio 1, the biggest in the studio. There were already a dozen other dancers, including Mina. Hitoshi, who was chatting with two of the other male dancers, both of them were in the hip-hop class and were rather nice boys, glanced up when she walked in and nodded to her. Izumi nodded back and headed to the bar, beginning to stretch next to one of her dance friends, Pearl, a girl from America. Hey Midoriya. How's you been? Pearl asked, smiling as she moved into an arabesque. Good. Crazy. Izumi said, lifting her legs straight out to the side. I can only imagine, Pearl said. So, you and Mina pairing up like always? Izumi nodded, wincing at the way her muscles strained. Eventually, they were done stretching, and Madame Marinette swanned into the room. Good morning, my lovelies. Are we all ready to dance? She asked, beaming at them. She was dressed in a leotard, a skirt, and a pair of tights, along with a pair of point shoes, likely all made by her Save the Shoes. The teacher was a very skilled designer, and often helped design the company's dance costumes. Yes, madam. The dancers all chorused. All right. A few of you have planned some lovely routines, so they'll be going first. Haru, Pearl, I believe you two are up first. Pearl nodded to Izumi with a smile, and Haru, one of the boys Toshi was talking with, made his way over. Their dance was pretty, with Pearl managing a lot of technical moves that looked difficult without a partner. At one point she was in a full arabesque, perfectly balanced, with Haru carefully dancing around her. As the music stopped, Izumi burst into delighted applause. Haru teasingly leaned over Pearl's hand and pressed a delicate kiss to her knuckles, smirking when the American girl blushed. Wonderful work. Next up is Izumi and Mina. Let's see what you girls can do. Izumi pushed off of the bar, smiling. She pulled up the song on her phone, hooking it up to the Bluetooth speakers at the far end of the room. Soon, the first few notes of one of her favorite American songs began to play. Toxic was a total earworm, and she had choreographed her half of the dance when it got stuck in her head on loop one day. The piece started simply, but as the tempo picked up, she began to move faster and faster. Eventually she was pirouetting rapidly, as Mina did some move that she couldn't even begin to name. As soon as the song ended, she froze, panting. That was perfect, girls. Madame Marinette cheered. If the song wasn't so unconventional, I'd ask you to perform at the next recital, but we all know how the crowd would react. Alright, now that the performances are out of the way, let's work on some partnered moves. My lovely ballerinas and ballerino, please move to the bar, while my dear breakdancers, I'd like you to run the last moves Luca had you practicing. Izumi high-fived Mina and moved to the bar, elated that their dance had gone over so well. Now, all she needed to focus on was the field trip on Monday. Izumi smiled as Ida yelled at the class to line up properly, waving his hands. He would be so disappointed to learn that it wasn't the layout he thought. She elbowed Toshi, trying not to giggle, when he began chopping at the air and silently moving his mouth beside her in an excellent imitation of Ida. Still biting her lip to contain herself, she followed the others onto the bus, heading for the back. Aiza-chan. Sit with me. Oka-chan cheered, tugging her into a seat. Toshi merely flopped into the seat next to hers with a faint humph. So, what's today's trip about? Achiko asked Aizawa, who was a few rows in front of them. Today is rescue training. You'll be split into teams and sent to different areas, each containing a simulated catastrophe. It will be your assignment to collect tokens that have been scattered across the areas. Depending on a list of factors, you'll either pass or fail. For now, everyone be quiet and let me sleep. With that, Aizawa pulled his ever-present sleeping bag from seemingly nowhere and curled up on a row of seats, quickly falling asleep. Oh, I want to be a rescue hero, so this is perfect. Achiko cheered. This is gonna be fun. Don't let Aizawa hear you say that, Toshi grumbled, burying his face in the crook of his elbow as he reclined his seat. Izumi decided he had the right idea, and leaned her head against his shoulder. Within a few minutes, the faint chatter of her peers and the bumping of the bus lulled her to sleep. X0X0X. She awoke to Hitoshi shaking her slightly and nodded at him blearily. He stood up and made way for her to get out, the two of them being the last off the bus. Aizawa and 13 the space hero were giving a lecture on the dangers of quirks. Honestly, was only half awake, so she wasn't really listening. They trudged into the USJ. Aizawa had griped about the DMN mess that was the UA budget. Seriously, the board of directors was insane. And Aizawa turned around, getting ready to assign them each a team, when something caught Izumi's eye. Sensei! She shouted, drawing his attention to the square with a JRK of her head. Snagging her daggers from her belt, she slid into a combat position, gritting her teeth. Looks like she would be dealing with villains a lot sooner than anticipated. X0X0X. She and Tsu had been transported to the shipwreck zone, and with a quick rendition of AC/DC's Thunderstruck, she had electrified the water, easily taking out the villains that had surrounded them. Sadly, the boat was still sinking, so they weren't going to be able to hide here. Right as she was devolving into a small panic attack, Tsu spoke. Climb on my back, Carol. I should be able to jump us to shore. The other girl crouched down a bit, and Izumi looped her arms around Tsu's neck, right as the amphibious girl leaped with all her strength. They didn't quite make it to shore, instead landing about 15 feet out, still in the water. Luckily, Aizawa-sensei's training over the summer had covered swimming lessons, so the sudden dip didn't make Izumi's current panic any worse. They had swum to shore, both trying desperately to stay quiet, and Izumi nearly screamed at what she saw. Aizawa-sensei was lying face down on the ground, with his head being pinned by some monstrous thing. The thing in question was massive, with the beak of a bird and an exposed brain. What was that? The monster raised Aizawa-sensei's head off the ground and then slammed him into the concrete so hard that it cracked. Her mentor let out a groan of sheer agony, and Izumi bit her lip. A quick check showed that her muzzle was busted. She'd never meant for it to get wet, so it was completely fried. Unbuckling it from her neck, she set it to the side, before taking a deep breath. We can go if we want to, night is young and so am I. She kept her voice quiet, trying not to draw attention. Tsu shot her a questioning look, but Izumi just shook her head. And we can dress real neat, from our hats to our feet, and surprise them with a victory cry. Slowly, she began to heft herself onto the edge. Say, we can act if we want to. If we don't, nobody will. And you can act real rude and totally removed, and I can act like an imbecile. She was crouched on the shore's edge, still singing under her breath, when the one she believed to be the leader spoke. Nomu, leave the neat, get the girl. He cackled, pointing at her. Izumi gasped, as suddenly the monster was in front of her, grabbing her around the ribs and squeezing. It picked her up, and Izumi could barely think before it was standing in front of its master. This little hero thinks she gets an entering theme. He chuckled, scratching at his neck. And say, Izumi gritted out. We can dance, everything's out of control. A barrier began to flicker into existence around Aizawa-sensei. Nomu, shut her up. The young man ordered. Nomu squeezed tighter, and she swore she could feel her ribs cracking. They're doing it from pole to pole. We can dance, everybody look at your hands. The Nomu began to squeeze somehow even tighter, and Izumi screamed in agony. She was going to die like this. At least she saved Aizawa-sensei. Right as the world began to dim at the edges, the beast holding her was frozen up to the waist. Nomu, leave the girl, handle the brats. The leader hissed. Izumi pushed herself up on trembling arms. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safety dance. Oh, the safety dance. Ah yes, the safety dance. Right as she finished, a barrier appeared fully around Aizawa-sensei. The villains around him began to murmur to themselves, trying to figure it out. There was a sudden pressure on her back, and her weak arms gave out, her face slamming into the concrete. Her left arm was grabbed by the wrist and yanked on. She let out a loud shriek of pain as her arm felt as if it was about to be ripped off. Shut up! The lead villain hissed, dropping her wrist. Young Shigaraki. A smooth voice called, and she vaguely saw the blue-haired villain standing over her look to where the voice came from. So, his name was Shigaraki. What? Kurogyri? I am afraid one of the students had escaped. He may be going for the heroes. Ugh! Shigaraki shrieked. If you weren't our warper, I'd kill you right now. He snarled, scratching at his neck again. Grabbed the little frog girl still in the water. I think this little bard could be useful. He leered at her, and Izumi gagged a little. Wait, little frog girl? She couldn't let another person get hurt. Mama, we all go to hell. Izumi sang, panting as she pushed herself to her feet. Mama, we all go to hell. I'm writing this letter and wishing you well. She spat blood onto the tiles, glaring down the villain before her. Mama, we all go to hell. She grabbed her shoulder and levered it up, before slamming it back into the socket. Oh well now, Mama, we're all gonna die. She wailed, trying not to collapse as the room swayed. Her throat was going dry. Mama, too, we're all gonna die. Stop asking me questions, I'd hate to see you cry. Mama, we're all gonna die. There was Bakugo, blasting away at the beast, the one that the boss had called Nomu. While he handled the beast, she would tackle the big boss. This song, it wasn't safe. There were a lot of repercussions. It was on a list of songs that she was banned from singing unless it was a life or death emergency. Well, this qualified. Taking a deep breath and wincing at the way her lungs hurt, she prepped for the next line. And when we go, don't blame us. Yeah. Belting was hard, what with how she was 90% sure her ribs were broken on the right side. The villain lunged, and Izumi twirled gracefully out of the way. We'll let the fires just bathe us, yeah. Power welled up inside her, and she felt the smoke in her already sore lungs. You made us oh so famous. He lunged, and she felt his hands slam into the concrete mere inches from her foot when he stumbled. We'll never let you go. She swung a high kick at his head, which he leaned back to avoid. And when you go, don't return to me, my love. Mama, we're meant for the flies. She stressed the last word, before gasping in another breath. And right now they're building a coffin your size. Mama, we're all full of lies. This was it, she had reached the peak of the song. She only knew because the ground beneath them began to shake, and dozens of shadowy hands began to emerge from the massive cracks, clawing frantically in an attempt to free themselves. One of the hands grabbed a retreating Shigaraki around the ankle, and he stumbled, falling flat on his butt. Kurogyri! Get me out of here! He shrieked, eyes wide behind the hand on his face. The teleporter, unfortunately, was rather occupied, as Kirishima was slowly crushing the metal around his neck in a hardened hand. She swayed slightly, as the hands burst forth another few inches, some of them beginning to leverage themselves out of the cracks. Well, mother, what the war did, to my legs and to my tongue. You should have raised a baby girl, I should have been a better son. If they could coddle the infection, they can amputate at once. You should have been, I could have been a better son. The cracks were widening. The things crawling through the cracks finally breached the surface. They were zombies, rotting corpses, all dressed in military fatigues, and they would do everything she wanted. She paused, watching and catching her breath, as the shambling corpse still holding Shigaraki's ankle dragged him towards her. She didn't have the ability to sing anymore, her ribs were poking at her something that they probably should not have been, and God, breathing hurt. Luckily, her power over the zombies would hold for at least 10 minutes, even without her singing the rest of the song, so long as she could just stay conscious, damn it. No fair. Shigaraki screeched, wriggling madly. No one said there was some overpowered bard here. Kurogyri. Retreat. Soldiers. Izumi said, swaying a little as the world blurred at the edges. Apprehend the enemy. Show mercy, but be a little... She broke off, coughing and wheezing. Be a little rough. Izumi! A voice screamed, and suddenly someone was catching her as her legs gave out, and her voice failed. What song did you use? Shakily, she tried to sign, but her arms wouldn't move. She needed to stay awake. If she couldn't. Right as she blacked out, there was a great explosion of noise. Oh good. The heroes were here.